I want to call a select board meeting to order on January the 7th, 2025 at 6:33 p.m. Hi, everybody. It's cold, but it's warm up here, so we're okay. So Happy New Year, belated Happy New Year to everybody. Larry is going to sit up here as the sole member of advisory that's coming in person to listen to the capital presentation. I think everybody else is on Zoom, Larry, but we will see. Okay, let's start out with our usual public comment.
Thank you.
Mr. Ferris, welcome.
Good evening. David Ferris, 118 Turnpike Road. Thank you again for the time this evening. I just start by keeping my remarks brief.
3 minutes.
Yeah, 3 minutes. The first part is thank you very much to the Select Board, ZBA, Concom, Building Inspector, Electrical Inspector. We've had a phenomenal working relationship since we started doing business here about 15 years ago, and it's been very constructive. I'm here before you tonight to share a couple of things. One, we felt that the town planner, in addition to the chair of the planning board, had been very obstructionist to our efforts to advance projects that are, I think, of critical importance to the community. And we've sat silently and watched other developers, I think, receive some of the same treatment. People like Ken's and Graystar, I think, who was the large buyer of the land that was the Data General site, that deal got scuttled, I think, in large part for how they were handled in front of the planning board. Luckily, the sale across the street did go through to Joe Zink, and that's helped our tax revenue significantly. As a result of sort of feeling the targeting, I think, at our firm by not just me, I think some of our colleagues feel the same way. We started to ask questions and wanted more transparency in government, and we sought several FOIA requests around specifically the town planner's communication and the chair's communication. What we got back from the records officer is a documented answer that no such records existed. We sent a litigation hold letter to Ms. Luttrell, and almost, I'd say, roughly 24 hours to a day and a half later, Ms. Houlihan relented and shared several group chats between the board as a whole, touching on different business issues that a board would normally review in open session. We were told when we received that disclosure that it was a partial disclosure and it was not the entire disclosure. In receiving those documents, it became very clear that the answers that the town records officer got are inconsistent with the documents that were disclosed by one board member showing that there had been communications. We sought an appeal. The state made an order to produce those records. Those records still have not been produced. I think the benefit of being where we are tonight, we have two chairs. We have the current chair, you, Madam Chair, and we have the past chair here. And I think, the proof in the pudding would be to simply look at, your cell phone records and see were there communications over the past 18 months that occurred with the town planner and or with the chair of the planning board. And if the answer is yes, then we have a disclosure and open transparency issue in town government that needs to be addressed. And I say that because in one situation, it's a town employee under the direct purview of the town's oversight, and in the other situation, it's an elected official. And I think these laws are in place for transparency in government, and I think until we read what those communications are, we can't fully understand why some of the actions that are occurring in open meeting, like reading disparaging remarks about our company or our projects or me personally, sending emails and whatnot that mischaracterize the firm and what our intentions are in the community and working with other vendors. It's really serious stuff. So I would really just came here tonight to A, make the select board aware, and B, ask for some assistance, after you give it, careful thought in terms of how we get compliance by a town employee to produce what they said didn't exist, which clearly does exist, and by a chair of a board that works in the community.
So public comment, we don't respond to it because...
I'm not looking for one.
I was listening.
Thank you. So,
what did you just hand me? What is this?
We handed you both a letter summarizing what we just talked about tonight and the actual documents that have been turned over that show there were multiple group chats that were only disclosed partially by one planning board member. And the last thing I would just say is, to the extent this board engages in text communications with the chair of the planning board or with the town planner, the obvious question would be, if I know you to all be honest, fair-minded people, and I want to be very careful here in one respect in concluding my remarks. I believe most of the planning board in the town is pretty fair-minded. I think they're not necessarily pro-development, but they're not anti, everything. I think we're really talking, and I really want to be clear because the broader community of Southborough has been very supportive and very helpful to our entire company, and I don't want my remarks tonight to misconstrue an entire board. I really think it's zeroed in on the chair leading the broader initiative internally and not complying with what our requests are. And we now have very conclusive, indisputable, time-stamped responses that were given to the Southborough Records Officer. And then we have a reversal by one board member producing communications that they're actually commenting on, both Ms. Luttrell and Karina.
Okay.
So that's the conclusion of my remarks, but I really look for some sort of cooperation from this select board and some sort of formal response, either, in writing or phone call. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Vanessa? Okay, so the highlight of the evening is the presentation by Capital of the fiscal year 26 recommendations. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, back up. So we've got a liquor license request from Nans. Is he in the audience? Vanessa? Jordan? Mackey, I believe? Do you see it?
I don't see him.
Do we see anyone that looks like they might be Nans?
There's someone who didn't, just put in the string of numbers, not.
All right, if there's anybody in the audience that is from Nans, please raise your hand quickly so we can get this going. No one? All right. Okay, Mark?
Notice is hereby given under Chapter 138 of the Mass General Laws, Nan's Market South LLC, doing business as Nan's Market. Jordan Mackey, manager, has applied for an annual on-premises Section 12 restaurant wine and malt beverages license on the premises located at 359 Turnpike Road, Southborough, Mass., described as 3,500 square feet of restaurant space, one floor, previously licensed with an off-premises license for sale of wine and malt beverages. Southborough Select Board will hold a public hearing Tuesday, January 7, 6:30 p.m. McAuliffe Hearing Room at the Southborough Townhouse, 17 Common Street, virtually through a link located at www.southboroughmass.gov/674/virtual meetings. All interested parties are encouraged to view and/or participate.
All right, Vanessa, will you keep your eye open because we do have a question for him? Okay, can someone make a motion to open the Nans public hearing?
So
Do we have a
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, so just to kind of tee this up, Nans has been here for what, a year and a half now? Almost 2 years? And they, until now, sold beer and wine, but they had no place to drink it on premises. So they're adding seats, I believe they're adding 38 seats or so to it by popular demand. And they would like to have a license that will allow that beer and wine that they sell to be consumed on premises. Correct? Okay, so this is not a full liquor license. This is a beer and malt license, I believe is what it's called.
Yes.
Mark, right? Which we have extra ones to be able to grant. I'm just so used to Boston where you have to go through a broker to get a liquor license that it's unusual to know that a town has an inventory that we could issue if we could get people to come out here and open restaurants. Okay, we have no one to ask any questions of. Anyone have any questions on granting this license? Andrew?
Yes, I have a question. So I looked at the application, and I was confused why the applicant is Nan's Market South LLC, right? That's the entity listed on the public hearing notice and the application for a new license. And then on the entity vote, it's made on behalf of an entity called Mostly Vegetables PBC. Now, I don't know what that is,
Yeah.
or...
So we've gone through inventory of entities. We know PLC in the UK,
Yeah.
we know.
And I don't see it, I looked in the
So we know what it is.
Mass Secretary of State's website and didn't find an entity called Mostly Vegetables, and I don't know what PBC stands for, so. I don't know if we,
I don't either.
I don't,
know.
we
We
don't,
never heard of a PBC. I mean, public company, I don't know what it is.
Oh, is this one of those B companies?
I truly have never heard,
I don't think there's such a
I've never
thing
heard
as
of
a PBC.
PBC as a type of entity in this country.
There is this movement to have some sort of, it's called a B company, and it's supposedly, operating at a higher
Yeah,
ethical
it's a
standard.
public benefit corporation.
That's what it is?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
And, if we want, I'd be willing to grant this for 30 or 60 days, subject to, clarification on the status of the PVC. I don't, I want to help them in a,
This license, so after the board approves, just procedurally, after the board approves this evening, it will then go to the ABCC, who then reviews it and then lets us know that it's all set to be issued. That takes somewhere from 4 to 6 weeks for
Okay.
that to happen. So there is going to be a process after tonight. It will not be granted immediately anyway.
It looks like PBCs have to be registered with the Secretary of State, so Andrew, if you look...
Andrew looked,
they're
I
don't
not
looked,
see
there.
it,
I
yeah.
didn't see.
That's a little questioning.
It might not be registered here. It doesn't necessarily have to be a mass corporation, I don't think. So, anyway, I've never heard of it. Okay, other than that, does anyone have any issue doing this? I think that this is something Southborough wants. I know
Yep.
some people who want to be able to sit down at Nan's and eat and possibly drink.
I think Nan's is doing a great job. We ought to
I do
support
too.
him, so,
yeah. I move we approve the license.
second.
Any further discussion? You're looking skeptical?
No, I'm going to vote for it.
Okay, all right. All in favor? Okay. So we've got the license here that we can sign later, correct?
So there's no public.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no public comment?
So we need to vote to close.
Andrew Pfaff does for this? Well, I'm going to let him call the meeting to order when we get to Capitol. So, Andrew, keep your hand up if you want to come over to talk about Nan's liquor license. Is it still up? Okay, bring him over. Maybe he's going to tell us about a PBC.
Hey Kathy, hey everybody.
Hey.
Yeah, PBC is a registered company with the SEC that allows you basically to buy shares in a company. So it's a Delaware, based company that allows you to just basically buy shares of it.
Okay, so,
No issues there, just figured let you guys know what it is.
well, no, thank you. We need to learn things, so thank you very much. We'll see you shortly. Okay, so any more public comment? Okay, so can someone make a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? All right, that's done. Okay, now, Jason. Okay, so while he's come up, do you have a quorum?
I have at least Steve. Is Joe or Tony online? I wasn't expecting Tony, but Joe Palmer?
So-
So I do
So
have a
what's the quorum
quorum.
for you, three?
3, yep.
Okay, so you call, so let's see. Hey, Andrew, is Andrew still over? Andrew, do you have a quorum? Larry is here with us.
Let me check on the participants. Barry's online, Marcy,
Marcy's online.
and Larry, so yeah, we have a quorum.
All right, so can you bring over Barry and Marcy?
And if anybody else from advisory's on here that I don't recognize their name, raise your hand.
All right, so you want to call Capital?
So I will call Capital Improvement and Planning Committee meeting to order at 6:47 PM.
Andrew?
And I call the advisory committee meeting to order at 6:48 PM.
All right, so Vanessa's got this for you?
She should be able to pull it up, yeah.
All right, so we will turn this over to Malinowski.
So thank you for having me back. I know we were expecting to do this back before the holidays, but ran a little long on NERI. All very good conversation. So first of all, Steve Holland's here with me this evening. For those of you that haven't met, he is our newest member, but it's been well over a year at this point, right? Few cycles? Yeah, so, been a few cycles now through it, and Joe's online, who's been with us pretty much since the beginning of capital planning. This is gonna look a little different than what we've done, especially for those of you that have been sitting on the board for a while. We have a lot of requests in front of us in the immediate term, and I'd ask you to just put the school to the side for a second tonight. And we all know it's there, and you'll see references to on certain slides, but we have a whole slew of items. Mainly, I do see one department head in the room, come from mainly one department this year, which is, again, unique. We're usually dealing with situations where we have competing interests between departments, but I think what you're going to find as we go through this presentation, ARPA has significantly dampened the need for us to make tough decisions in prior years as a capital committee. And then when we didn't have to make tough decisions, town meeting and all of you didn't have to make tough decisions with your recommendations. Unfortunately, I think that's going to change this year. There will be things that I think at some point we are going to pull as a group or as through votes that are not going to make it through, that the department head is likely still going to advocate for, versus in the past, we've had situations where the department head has kind of, I'll call it acquiesced and pulled back on certain things before we had to make certain tough decisions. So just to lay the framework, I think one of the things we're really looking to get from you tonight is an initial reaction of how much more you want us to dig on certain items. Everything we're going to talk about here tonight, there is clearly bona fide need to deal with in the short term. We've already dealt with what we believe kind of the noise on the side, but we also realize that all the numbers we're going to present tonight are far more than any of us could ever support bringing to town meeting floor. So we're going to need some guidance of how far we want to ring fence this. And obviously, given all of you are working through the operational budget, we realize we're likely to be back either as part of Budget Saturday or a future iteration. So with that, Vanessa, let's go to the next slide. I briefly introduced our members. Tony Schoner is not with us tonight. We do have a recent open vacancy. I would implore you, advertise, help us fill this. You know what's in front of us. We need 5 members because the diversity of thought is, I think, what's going to be really important for us to bring forward thoughtful processes. And also just a huge thank you to Mark and Brian as our ex officio members. They're at every single one of our meetings, help us be prepared for those meetings. So next slide, please. We always have this in our slides, and I think it's important to kind of look back over time. We basically break this out between general fund and water fund in terms of both appropriations and debt service. We fully acknowledge that there are other funds that do bond, CPA and ambulance fund in particular. But as you can tell, if you go back to 2019, 2020 timeframe, right before COVID, we were spending upwards of 8% of our annual budget on capital, whether it be through appropriations or through debt. That number has gone as low as 4% in and around the 2024 and even 2025 timeframe, slightly diluted by the fact that we were covering some capital expenses through ARPA, but overall, our capital expenditures have been declining as an overall percentage of our operating budget, which I think what we need to do, and I think this came through in some part of the DOR report as well, we do probably need to try to have a policy of a appropriate range that we should be spending on capital in a given year. I realize that may be a moot conversation if we take on any sort of school project, whatever the size of that project is, but at least as we currently stand for FY26, we are still projecting to be in the 7% range of the overall initial operating budget that's been proposed to all of you before any cuts. So that's still fairly low in terms of some thresholds, and we all have already acknowledged there's going to be some cuts that are going to have to go into the appropriated and debt service that we're throwing forward here.
So Jason, just to be clear, top line, the appropriated capital, the items that were funded by ARPA are or are not in that?
They are not.
Okay.
That's why we have the big bold
Okay.
at the bottom.
So if they were in there, that 4.69 and 4.42 would be bigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you kind of look at the 2 lines, the one that's gone down the most is the debt service because we paid off the schools, all the old schools, right? So it's gone down. That first line is not crazy different, right, from 19 to 25. But again, 25 and 24 would have been more if we added in the things that we bought with ARPA.
Yeah, but I agree with everything you said, but I think the one thing we forget is how much prices have increased since 2019. So what we're getting for that dollar amount, even if you were to add it in and it came out roughly the same, is much less. I think the other thing we started to see last year, and I realize we were trying to manage a tax rate, is we started to bond things that we really should not be bonding, and that we're gonna see now bleed in over the next couple of years, right? We bonded some pretty low threshold items, and I realize it was a policy decision. We needed to do that to get the rate where we need to go, but also get the assets in the door to deal with critical needs. But we're gonna also need to make sure that we can afford what we're buying in the current year, unless it is a true long-term project that has lifespans of 5+ years that, you know, in the cost is in the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So you believe anything over 5 is appropriate to bond, anything less than 5, we really should pay for upfront,
I
as a general rule?
I would say when we were bonding $100,000 and $200,000 items last year, that was, in my opinion, bad policy. But ultimately, I do respect the town treasurer has that authority, right? And I know he was working with all of you. I would say we should be,
I don't think that,
you issue the bonds, but.
yeah, he issues the bond. He has
Yeah.
complete autonomy with respect to how to structure a bond or borrowing. He doesn't have authority to say which things should be bonded or not bonded.
Right.
That lies with this board, or this really lies with town meeting.
Not to get too much in the weeds, you know, it costs money to issue a bond, too. There's the
Yeah.
cost, and, you know, the lower the bond, the more the cost are as a percentage.
So just think something we should be considering as we go through some of the numbers tonight, because we do have items in there that were less than $200,000 that were bonded last year that we've never done before, right? So if that's either going to be our policy going forward, we need to be eyes wide open to it.
Just to sort of, the conversation I was going to have with you, hopefully in the next week, I've been sitting with Brian and company and Andrew working on essentially the town financial policies. And I think they're in line with what you're saying. The 200,000 is sort of the minimum you would consider. And I think we need to sort of sit down and talk about where we're going with this, because it, you know, the debt policy, if we're going to have a more substantial discussion about this on the 21st, about, you know, what our financial policies are, including our debt policy and our capital structure policy with, you know, and then if we actually adopt them as policies, we kind of have to stick with them or the rating companies get grumpy. And so it's actually been a very nerdy but fascinating sort of discussion.
Okay, more to come on that one.
Yeah, so then I'll also just highlight the water items. You'll see a drastic increase this year in terms, at least what's being requested right now. There's significant needs outside of everything you're all talking about with Hopkinton that have been brought forward by Bill. We have reserved judgment on all of those projects until we can see the water rate analysis of what these would do, and don't feel like we're in a position to opine on those items at this point, because we know it's kind of part and parcel. Like, we can say these need to be done, but do they have to be done to maintain water service to those customers? Or are they, you know, trying to be ahead, and we need to think about bonding versus appropriation and prioritization? So more to come on that as you all finalize the water rate analysis.
And we're going to have the presentation by Bill, Matt, and company on February 4th, and then either vote that night or vote on the 25th. You know, we got to skip a week in February because of school vacation, so our meetings are 4th and 25th. So we're going to deal with it in February.
Yeah. So, and I think it is an important part, the questions you all should be asking is, they have all the capital, right? It should all tie to what we have and what Bill's submitting. But I think you should all, as you think about the rates, you know, what level of capital are you assuming in there as we move forward? And then we will help you to prioritize from there. Next slide, please. So we've had all the major department heads. We gave every department head, regardless of whether anything on the capital plan, an opportunity, 45-day window where we kind of open the capital plan. We have encouraged everyone to bring capital items to us as they become aware of them throughout the year, even if we're not within a town meeting cycle. We actually requested formal bids for anything that they are looking to do within the next 2 years. We realize and acknowledge that bids change over time, but we really wanted to see that the department heads had done their research and were not just bringing us a round number, but bringing us something that had, some substance behind it, subject to obviously inflationary type pressures. Each of the department heads that did submit something that's brought before you did appear at a public capital meeting, got a chance to articulate both their short-term and long-term items. To the extent that they had a lot of short-term items, that took up most of their time. To the extent that they had very few short-term items, we did have some longer-term discussions with some departments. As you'll see, and I already acknowledged, there are some departments that have heavy lifts this year, and there are some departments that we've been seeing a lot from in prior years, such as fire, that have really, don't have significant needs now because they, quote-unquote, have gotten caught up on most of their major, six-figure type numbers and seven-figure type numbers. We vet all capital items. Even if someone tells us they're going for a grant, we've requested that they bring it forward. The other important thing to note, even though none of us have any sort of authority over both the local and regional school committees and that administration, they do come and are part of our process. They submit all the same paperwork and do all the same forms that the department heads that are under your authority do. So we do appreciate that their willingness to do it. They obviously could say thanks but no thanks, but they have appreciated the process from what we've been told and have been collaborative out of it, and obviously it does benefit them to be part of the same process in terms of having a unified front as we go to town meeting. We continue to have issues where department head comes to us in September as we start this process, and all of a sudden a police cruiser has changed pricing, or a bid, looks like it'll be different because there's now going to be a tariff on something, or there's a different material that would be used. One of the things that we have talked with Mark and Brian a little bit about is, instead of approving individual capital items by a dollar amount, having a capital budget for a year and listing out the items that would be covered by that, and give some leeway that if the police cruiser ends up costing $3,000 more, but the DPW project costs $3,000 less, that there is some ability within that article to move between certain projects without, and again, put some policy and procedures around it, but just as you're thinking about your policies and procedures, that's something, again, to give some liberty, but at the same time, we need to tell the taxpayers what we're going to use it for within those bounds.
There was one year at town meeting where something like that came up. I don't know if that's what you're referring to there, where someone wanted to, increase one.
It was one of the outside
Yeah.
town meetings, and it was a fire truck was part of that. And Al might have even been part of that request. That's the one where you lowered the budget for the public safety building utilities, and there absolutely was a question at the end about that fire truck and trying to do something, but I can't.
I actually think it's the culvert, the Northborough Road culvert.
Yeah.
And there was a little noise about everything DPW that year. I'll just leave it at that.
That's
It was- we
that's a
wanted to-
different meeting then.
Yeah.
There was a capital article for an item, and then town meeting said, we want to spend more money on
Yeah,
this.
well, that
That was
definitely
Northborough
was the
Road.
culvert. Yeah, that
Okay,
was.
yeah.
It was the North.
And the town moderator ruled it out of order. You couldn't do that.
Wow.
Right.
Jason was
Yeah.
up there on the stage for probably almost an
I
hour.
was up there, it was like 2 hours, and I presented the near feasibility in about 10 minutes.
So is that what you're referring to
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
well, but I'm also saying now, and that was even before some of these price escalations, I just think as you look at policy, you should be considering what sort of authority, it should all, if we have 8 things we're bringing forward in that article, you can't buy anything outside of those 8 things. But if one item comes in above and one comes below,
You can
giving these department heads some ability to team and work together, I think it will encourage, if DPW can save on an item in a certain year and it helps police, police may be able to help DPW in the next year.
Is that
as an
something you
example.
would write into the article to?
Well, you could word it so, we're asking for $1 million for capital, and we're estimating this is how it would be split among these things. We want to buy these things, and we think this is what they're going to cost, something like that. Al's got a different idea about how to do this.
Yeah, I
by the way.
think, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon.
So, well, you should,
Yeah.
you should talk about it, maybe not right this minute, but yeah, so I think that makes
Yeah.
sense, because, yes, look at what prices have done and how quick things move.
Yeah, I think we need to be moving in the direction of identifying a pool of money that can be used for capital expenses in, various broad categories, but then allowing managers to manage within that with the appropriate oversight by this board or whoever the elected boards are, I think that would actually make town meeting simpler and easier, and we need flexibility because the world changes. You saw my impassioned epistle about our in-ground assets, which, we know they're going to fail, we just don't know when. It's like, my dentist tells me the best time to get a crown is the day before your tooth breaks. And the same thing is true for all the culverts that we have in town, or the drainage systems. And, we know we're going to spend a certain amount of money, or roughly what that money is, but we don't know exactly what it's for. And I think we need to move away from asking town meeting to fund, this little project and that little project, and maybe, hold managers accountable for managing with the appropriate supervision and guardrails.
I'm not sure town meeting agrees with that, and I don't remember, other than the culvert, getting really hung up on capital the last few years.
We haven't. No, so this is not something from a town meeting perspective. This is just now, once you've given the money to the department heads, they have no ability to go above that article. They can't go unless they go to the reserve fund, which is not usually an emergency type item, right? So the advisory can weigh in on whether they'd approve that or not. But just, again, something we should look at, potential, what other towns do in this area, and what policy may be able to be adapted. So with that, I'll go to the next slide.
The fly in that ointment, though, if they all go up, what do you do then? If they're all more than what we should? Okay. All right.
Teamwork.
All right.
So this slide is going to be broken down into two. All departments other than DPW, and then the DPW has its own slide. Bill, you're more than welcome to chime in at any point when we get to your slide. Big picture, these are the items that have currently been proposed to be appropriated. The capital maintenance fund that's been around for a long time, $100,000. Repairs and improvements to the Flag School, $175,000. New overhead doors at the DPW facility, that falls under facilities, not DPW, $250,000. Durable medical equipment of $25,000, that's just ambulance type equipment. Personal protective equipment for firefighting, this is the recurring article to allow for replacement of fire gear as it expires or is damaged, $40,000. Car 22, this is for a deputy chief car, $90,000. So as you think about, one of the things we talked about with the chief is, as you think about that position that's being proposed, there is a capital cost to it as well, both short-term and long-term. The chief did tell us that if at any point that position is not funded or supported, whether it be through your process or a town meeting, that this item would come out as well. So just as you think about the cost of adding the position, this is unusual, but you do have a capital cost in this particular instance. We're proposing 2 police vehicles, which is what we have proposed for the last couple of years. And Chief Newell, even without staffing increases, I know that's on the table as well, is certainly gearing more towards 2 to 3 moving forward. So this is just something we need to watch. Not too long ago, we were funding 1 to 2 per year. So just, that's just something we need to be aware of here. These are marked police cruisers, so these are, it's more the outfitting of the car than the actual car itself sometimes, of how much it actually costs to get these things on the road safely. The Recreation Capital Fund, which was new last year, there's a request to increase that or replenish it by another $25K. There's floor replacement at the Finn School related to water damaged flooring. The question has come up as part of that of, if Finn was not to be a school, would you still do that? They think that for that building to be functional, regardless of the use, that the floor replacement should occur and would be able to be used if it was decommissioned as a school still. Replacing the stage curtains and rigging for safety code at the Trotter Auditorium, $55,000. The Trotter Technology Infrastructure and Equipment, $60,000. And air conditioning at the Trotter School, $130K, as they continue to advance their HVAC plan after the learnings at Finn last year. And then there's also technology upgrades at Woodward. To be clear, these are all proposed to be appropriated, not debt funded.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, there was a time when the school, we did deal with their technology outside the school budget, and then they pulled it in. So it's now come back out?
They are abiding by our town capital policy. They are giving us their capital items in seeking articles.
Okay, so I,
It's sort of left pocket, right pocket. If you want to put it back into their budget, then you're going to see a corresponding increase on their side. I don't want to speak for the superintendent and school committee, but I wouldn't think you would care where it is as long as they got it approved. This is more transparent because this says this is all capital going into anything owned by the town of Southborough, regardless of the department that's operating the building.
okay, so all of their capital requests are outside the school budget for fiscal year '26. They're here.
Yeah, and they have been for the last couple of years that I can recall.
Okay,
I was on advisory when we moved that back into the school budget. The thinking was that, you know, yes, in total, it's,
Go back one slide, Vanessa.
it's some six-figure number, but in fact, it really consists of multiples of $1,000 things. And so, and it has, you know, it has all the, it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, like an operating expense rather than a true capital expense.
I
Yeah, you
think,
can go,
yeah, I could honestly care less where this goes. I think it's just, the goal is to make sure it doesn't get lost. So
yeah.
if there's a view or a policy perspective of where it should go, we can certainly talk to
Give the
schools.
superintendent the flexibility to manage this, which, if it stays in the school budget, then it's his choice to set priorities, and the school committee's choice to set priorities. If it comes out, then they've lost the flexibility.
So if we go that route, I think just from a capital perspective, we would continue to vet them, but we'd keep them off of this presentation. Like we do that for the region, right? The region comes through as one number, so that would be consistent with how the region's done. We look at those items, but then they get buried in the overall assessment that gets proposed on town meeting floor. So if you all decide that, we can certainly circle back with the superintendent and school committee.
As long as you folks are looking at them, it doesn't matter to me.
I agree.
where
To
they
me,
are.
that's the
Yeah.
key, is
Yeah.
that it really is, everything capital is being vetted by this committee regardless of,
Does that include
Please, Lord.
CPA items?
It does when they actually tell us about them.
Okay,
those two.
all right.
Yeah, that's been our biggest struggle. But we have, like, for example, the complex that was a partial CPA, we looked at it in totality. There was one item last year that I'm forgetting about that kind of, they almost missed us, but we got it at the last minute.
All right, because I'm thinking of, we have a CPA application for this town common rail project. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I'm not.
Okay, it's what, like 100,000, 110?
Just over 100.
Yeah. Seems like a capital improvement, so just want to make you.
Around the
aware.
town common out
Yeah,
here, the
replacing
railing,
the railing, which is falling apart.
not the railroad.
Yeah, it sounds very exciting, but, I mean, yes, it should be a capital project.
Okay.
High
I mean,
technology.
the rule is everything. I don't care
Yeah.
who pays for it. Everything should go through this committee so they can truly take a look at it and see how it fits with.
Well, it's important for us to see how much we're investing in town's infrastructure regardless of the funding source.
Just want to put on your radar screen.
I appreciate it. We're not done with our work, thankfully, so, all right, Vanessa, we'll go to the next slide. This is all DPW related. Again, this is appropriation requests only. Pipe camera kit, this is actually a grant match. Depending on the timing of when the funds are needed, this may be a discussion sooner rather than later. Double drum roller for 17.5. This is item we've been carrying for a year or two now. This fell off last year. A tailgate spreader for 18.5. Hydraulic aerator attachment for 19,251. An asphalt hot box trailer for 24,614. Brine tank for 35,000. Stormwater management is in here for 68,000. Capital has taken the view that this is not a capital article. This is more of certainly an article, but something that we don't believe falls within our purview. So we have not weighed in on this, but we're carrying it until someone else tells us they're carrying it so it doesn't get lost for Bill. This is like really a management plan. It's not a actual asset we're going to put on our balance sheet.
Is it like monitoring?
Yeah, Bill, do you want to speak to that? You might need a mic.
Good evening, Bill Cundiff, DPW Superintendent. Are we on? Okay. Yeah, the federal government, the EPA, and the DEP have stringent requirements as to what MS4 communities, municipal separate storm sewer system, MS4 communities have to adhere to every year And every year they have a different list of agenda items that we have to adhere to as part of their permit that every community receives. So this coming year, we're in year 6 of the permit. We have certain things that we need to do, including the mapping of the drainage system, for example. We have a concept level mapping. It's very inadequate, but we need to bring that up to standard. Year 10 is going to be a milestone, so this is actually going to ramp up over the next number of years. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, because that doesn't sound like capital.
Yeah, so do you agree with Jason that this is important? It's got to go someplace, but not necessarily. the
Sure.
capital?
Yeah, if it's a warrant article, that's fine. If it makes no difference to me. My goal is to raise the question so everybody knows what's before them.
And this includes things like cleaning out the system, catch basins and that kind of stuff?
There are obligations to construct a certain number of best management practices, BMPs, every year, that sort of thing. So physical construction will be part of this, yes.
All right. Once we get beyond stormwater management, we get into a series of vehicles, a utility dump for 100,000, a service dump for 103,000 and change, a front-end loader for 257,000. So those are 3 different vehicles. You can see the age of some of them. We have gotten, upwards of 15 to 24, 25 years out of each of these assets. I will tell you, since we have seen a trend of increasing number of DPW vehicles coming before us, and we see it into the future as well. So I think there candidly was some deferred maintenance that was inherited by Bill when he took over, and we probably were candidly a little lean on some of our replacement for some of the vehicles of the DPW in the early 2020, 2021, 2022 phase, when we kind of look at what we're looking at now versus then, because there's a lot of duplicative vehicles in your fleet, but obviously plowing and other things they do on a day-to-day basis, they need multiple vehicles. I mean, just look at some of the age of that. So just know that those are out there and they will continue to be out there. The next is sinkholes, which this is going to be a trend. Sinkholes, culverts, those have popped up out of nowhere. We were looking at $45,000 culverts on Northborough Road not too long ago that became $90,000 culverts, and now we're looking at multi-million-dollar projects. That's going to be one of our asks to all of you, that we need to take a step back and think about how we're going to deal with this going forward, because the conditions are pretty obvious that they need to be dealt with in a lot of instances. There's also flashing beacons here in various locations throughout town. My understanding is there's been a grant that's been already awarded.
Not awarded, we've applied. So we have an obligation in order to, if we get the grant for these RFPs, which is, probably $70,000 per location that the state's going to give us for free, this equipment, we would be responsible for bringing those crossings up to standard with the state.
So is the 300 that cost to do that, or is this the total cost?
That is the total cost for site improvements for the 7 locations we've applied for.
So this would go down if you got the grant?
Correct. If we got, I expect that number will cover all 7. It will likely go down. We're going to, do our best to make sure each location complies as is. Where it doesn't, we'll have to do some work.
Okay, so Mark just disagreed with.
No,
what you said.
I'm just, it does not cover the cost of the beacons that you applied for.
This
the
does not,
grant.
the beacons are free from the
These
state.
are the site improvements that you're required to do.
Correct.
If you get the, right.
Correct.
So we're going to get
Mark
free
is
equipment, but there's a cost to getting the free
Okay,
equipment.
so this is
I think
not
it's
going
free.
down. You need $300,000 if you get that grant to do what you got to do to get.
That's our estimate,
Worst
correct.
case scenario.
That's our estimate.
Free is not quite
And
accurate.
then, are there intersections in particular that are contemplated for this, or?
Yes, so I solicited input from the police chief, myself, the highway foreman, as to which candidate locations made the most sense. We then screened those with VHB as to which were the least costly to improve. So we took the combination of those situations, focused on, dense population areas like near schools, so that we'd get the biggest bang for the buck, and this is what we come up with. And I'm sure that's a conservative number, but we'd rather be a little high than a little low.
So I'm confused. Are these railroad crossings? Well, what
No,
are
no,
you
no.
talking about?
RRFB are the flashing beacons like you see in front of the Fay School on Main Street. They push a button and the lights flash, the pedestrian crosses the street,
Oh,
Crosswalks.
okay? So it's the flashing beacons. RRFB are the flashing beacons.
and there's going to be 7 of these?
We have 7 locations that we've identified as good candidate locations.
Okay.
And if,
There's sort of 40,000 apiece, roughly.
Right, but there's one on each side, so you have to
Sure.
work them together, right?
and then last but certainly not least, just the annual allocation to roadway maintenance and sidewalks, which we've kept at 400,000 for now. I know that's obviously a huge topic of discussion of how we continue to improve our roads on a regular basis, maintain our roads, and obviously go out to bid on projects at a certain time and combine that with Chapter 90. You know, we've talked about many different avenues as a committee, but also with Bill and with your board and advisory over the years in terms of whether you debt fund a larger balance and allow for greater scale with some of these. But for now, we have kept the annual allocation in here until we kind of come up with a more formal plan. Obviously, you have the data from Beta now, and you know where your troublesome spots are and where your highest priorities are. But I think this, again, is going to be a policy decision of how aggressive you want to be compared to some of the other things that are in front of us, capital related.
Can we back up for a second to the sinkholes?
Mm-hmm.
With the new pipe camera, will we be able to get a much clearer picture of where potential breakdowns in terms of sinkholes, culverts that fail, et cetera, are, to at least understand the general magnitude of that problem? Because my bet is there are a lot of places out there that are at risk now that we just don't know about at this point. Will that allow us to make much more
I
detailed
expect
estimate?
there are more locations than we'd like to know about, frankly. The idea of the pipe camera, yes, we'd like to inventory every pipe in town, but I think that would be a scary proposition for a repair cost. So I would initially focus on proposed project areas where we have, paving projects forthcoming, take the low-hanging fruit first, and then move forward from there.
Okay, thanks.
That's not the last you're going to hear about culverts and sinkholes. We'll go to the next slide.
Bill has 2 whole pages here.
Yeah, so these are the water projects. I don't think we should go into them yet until you have your water rate analysis. But you can see, it's not just one item, right? You've got some vehicles in here, you've got Lindbrook Road, you've got various areas of the mains that need to be done, and the loop at Fisher and Presidential in terms of design funding only. So there's some big items in here just in 1 year, and this isn't it. And again, we've been told, Bill can confirm this, unrelated to anything you may be considering with Hopkinton, right? These are things we'd have to be doing on our own to maintain our own municipal water supply.
But if we do the Hopkinton deal, will some of that money potentially go for some of these projects?
Good.
No.
You tell us, depending on
We
how,
have,
Because you
The answer is no.
ourselves.
We would want to, as a priority, we have identified already, we have a water master plan. And as part of that master plan, we've identified a number of capital improvement projects that should get done. One of those things is replacement of Lover's Lane water main, which would easily absorb the lion's share of any revenue generated from the Hopkinton project. It probably wouldn't even cover the whole replacement on Lover's Lane. So
okay, thanks,
I've reserved that for that.
thanks.
Yeah.
good idea, though. Next slide. All right, so now, if you weren't scared by the numbers before, those were just appropriation numbers. These are projects that I think all of us could agree would need to be bonded if approved, based on the size of them. 2 of them are culvert or sinkhole projects. These were not on our capital plan 2 years ago. So these have literally come out of nowhere. That's candidly makes our job very frustrating, and it's not obviously built, right? Like, it's just like these, but I think we all need to acknowledge these things are gonna continue to happen due to aging infrastructure we have in town. You'll see it on one of our later slides, but just so everyone's aware, I don't know that it's gonna be sustainable for Southborough to continue to deal with these projects on our own, right? Some of these streets, major cut-throughs, right? Some of these streets, really important for the people that live in and around them, but not a significant amount of traffic, right? Some of these areas we're talking about. So we're gonna need to find a way to think about this far more broadly than just bringing it to town meeting, getting it debt funded and saying we're gonna pay for it over 10, 20 years. But there is no doubt in Capital's mind that these two areas need to be dealt with and dealt with soon based on the data and the pictures that Bill has provided. In particular, obviously, you know Willow Street in terms of the type of traffic that goes down there. And, you know, I don't think I need to go into much further detail on that. So we're going to need some help on this. This is not something Capital, we like to think we can solve a lot, but this is one thing we really need your help, and I think it goes beyond the borders of Southborough. I think it's your state legislator for how we deal with these.
Are there state funds for infrastructure like this?
Certainly, we could make an application to the one-stop program. The hook there, it would be under what was called, you know, historically the MassWorks grant. There's no new job creation, however, so that's the rub. We probably could have our state reps and senators and make a case to carry that forward with legislation. However, you know, and get some funding through the state. But that would be my only thought about getting some kind of grant toward that.
And I'm sure everybody has that same issue.
Now that being said, we did get a DER grant for $240,000 to cover the cost for the engineering on Willow Street, which is great. They have made it clear to me that they fully intend to follow the project through to completion. So not just the engineering. When we get to the point where we're constructing it, we'll reapply, we'll get on their docket again and get some more funding. Will it be that much? No.
I had a question for both Jason and Bill. We have a lot of culverts and sinkholes. Are there other towns around us who are dealing with this, or are we alone in this particular part of our cycle of roads?
I'm not aware of the magnitude. I do know, let me take a step back. The DER grant program, which is strictly for culverts, is a very competitive grant. So from that aspect, there are a lot of towns that are applying for the funding to repair culverts. So I think it is a problem. You know, back in the 50s and 60s, towns were putting in corrugated metal pipe, and it's that time of the season when these things are starting to go. You know, we could tackle some of the preventative maintenance end. You can line some of these pipes. That's what the camera is going to do. It's going to tell us what ones are good candidates for that kind of work. But again, it all costs money. We've got to prioritize where the need is. But for other towns, I'm not specifically aware of nearby communities having specific issues.
I think, you know, if you're going to use job creation as a reason, you might look at the flip side of that, which is job and business loss. You know, on Willow Street, we have a set of businesses that their only access is through Willow Street. And, you know, there are businesses there that need to run trucks in and out of there every day, and we want them to. And, you know, if they can't do that, they've got to go someplace else. So, you know, this may be job preservation rather than job creation, but it's, you know, a preserved job is the same as a created job.
You also have a school there that, you know, that's how they get in and out every day is through Willow Street, that the state might be interested in making sure that they had no issue with that too. That school is very important to the state, so throw that in there too. So Bill, the John and Mitchell Street sinkhole design, that's just the design?
No, that is the construction cost.
Okay, so that will take care of that sinkhole, $900,000?
Yeah, well, it really is the drainage system. It's not just one sinkhole. One sinkhole created our awareness of the problem. The drainage pipes in that neighborhood don't have a bottom, so it looks like a C, if you will.
Minor detail.
So
Okay, so you think the 900 would take care of the problem?
that's correct.
All right.
All right. As we go down the list,
So what's gonna say
we
on
go
this-
back, Vanessa. I missed two.
The good news keeps coming.
Yeah, so Recreation has brought forward Choate Fields this year. To be very honest, they had it next year. But if we do a school project, we are going to lose the Neary Fields next year. If we do anything there, right? Forget about what the project is for a second. I know I said I wasn't going to go there. We're trying to create a phased plan. Because if you're going to take multiple fields offline, then Choate actually does come forward next year, go and take 3 or 4 more other fields offline. It's not going to be feasible. And every year that passes, obviously, these projects go up. Choate Field has been talked about for as long as capital planning's been going on. For anyone who's not aware, Choate Field is the field that's in front of the Woodward School. It's that
And
whole-
it's to make it a turf field.
This is to make it turf, and usable, pretty much usable as long as you can use turf in New England, which is much longer than you can use grass. So this would be to really modernize that area. And there's already lights there, so we're not looking at like a separate lighting project or anything that would create controversy there. And it would just allow for far more use and far less, I'll call it, time off. So to be clear, we asked Recreation to bring this forward this year for discussion. This may or may not move forward. The other thing that Recreation has been very clear with us is they are not asking the town, that's the total cost. They believe that there are other ways to fund a project like this and are pretty bold about it. But obviously, because it is a town asset, we're going to have to own the total cost, own the project, own the oversight of it, and obviously be subjected to public bidding as opposed to private bidding. We obviously have a good example right next door that we partially funded in terms of what happened and didn't happen with the Algonquin project. Obviously, this is a far less scale. I think the discussion here is, what do we want to do with this, knowing that we have a phasing issue?
What did we do with Algonquin next door?
We did the whole Gonkplex, which is, we turfed
Okay,
Good.
next door, the next town.
next town, yeah, sorry.
When are we going to hear what these ideas are that might help fund this?
We've received an initial view, I will tell you,
From Rec Commission?
from Rec Commission and Travis. And I think it's going to go beyond that of like, you need private fundraising if you want to do anything beyond user fees. So they have a strong view on user fees, but the user fees are certainly going to be far greater than what we see now, but not against the cost of a 10 or 15-year bond to pay for this. And obviously, there will be a maintenance, like 10 or 15 years down the road, will be, if this were to get approved, you would be then replacing it again, as we've seen with the 9/11 field, which, you know, to all accords has been a great success, but that's obviously a very different story given the lease that's over there. So I think here, we need to basically figure out, one, is now the right time financially versus the phasing discussion, right? Like there's a pro and a con there. Two, how much of this are we comfortable putting forward to taxpayers, if any at all? Or do we need to make this thing self-sustaining through donation and/or user fees? And then I think the third part of this, and this was something that came across loud and clear in their presentation, is they were pretty much shut out of the CPA process. And a good portion of this project is CPA eligible.
Right.
I wasn't part of those discussions. I'm going to defer that to Travis and the RecCom, but they came forward to us and had this number bucketed out between CPA eligible and non-CPA eligible. And there's very clear guidance out there. We've been down this road a number of times. The amount that is CPA eligible is 7 figures. It's not 2 million, but it's certainly higher than 1 million. And they have it all broken down of what aspects of the project.
So they understood the CPA rules as far as turf fields go.
Yeah.
And were able to show CPC what that breakout is.
Yes. The two concerns that resonated with me of why this has not made any further progress, but again, we can't influence this too much other than inform, is one, the timing of how they do their applications and when you have to have stuff in and their whole process. So I think that's just administrative burden that's getting candidly in the way. And I think two is their concern about the ability to bond within the CPA. And I think the one thing I would encourage everyone to have an active dialogue of is I think you do have, well, I realize bonding capacity is limited based on the project that was done here and at the library and at Burnett House, right? There still are huge buckets of dollars sitting there, right? And I realize there's different buckets and you've got historic and affordable housing and other priorities you're trying to accomplish, but even an appropriation in the current term of any amount helps to offset the project that we're trying to do. So again, we need to make a decision soon of how aggressive we want to be with this project. It is Capital's position that this is certainly the right time to do it from a phasing perspective, in a town project perspective, and getting it onto our debt roll sooner rather than later. We appreciate Recreation's approach to this, that they are not asking the town to fund this in whole like they have for every other recreation project in the past 10 years. So, and then there's a private fundraising component that we all sitting at this table can't control, but obviously others in the community can.
So just to be clear, are they going to come forth in the next month or so with a detailed plan about what they would like to get town meeting to approve?
I think we need to help guide what parameters we could, right? Like, maybe we simplify this for a second. What does a 1 million, 2 million, 3 million bond look like, right? Brian can tell us that. We've costed out in the numbers you're going to see on the forthcoming slide, the full 3 million being bonded. Again, that's ultra conservative. We've heard that they're not going to ask the town to fund that, but that's what we've done. If you can get CPC to fund a portion of it, either through appropriation or a small amount of debt, they do some sort of private fundraising and they can close the gap through user fees. You obviously have a pretty good, compelling argument to at least put forward to the voters.
The CPC rejection makes no sense. CPC wanted the select board to buy $5 million worth of land for open space, a farm that was maybe going to be available to buy, and they wanted to spend $5 million on that. And they wouldn't even entertain this?
That's what we've heard multiple times now, and I confirmed it as late as this morning with Travis.
So
just
there
to make sure.
wasn't an application to the CPA?
They were basically
There are
told
deadlines
not
to
to
August
spend the
31st.
time on it, was kind of what I,
Okay, so then it's not real. Like, it's not really, because if this is a project where there's, part of it is CPA eligible and part of it's not CPA eligible, so
that's correct.
you would do both at the same time, but there's been no CPA application?
Yeah, they had,
They were
they-
told not to do it.
they've been consulting.
Okay.
Well, wait a
So-
minute. You don't get to tell people not to make an application, you know.
It sounds like they did.
They've been really grumpy with me, but I went ahead and put in an application, and, you know, if
Yeah.
they want to turn me down.
So,
that's-
so in fairness, we have a brand-new department head, right, that, as well, in that department, working with
Yeah.
a board and commission that's been trying to advance it. So I think it would be helpful if tonight we can come up with a game plan of, okay, like, is someone going to have a discussion with CPA or not? Is this just something we need to pass on and deal with the phasing concerns of the fields? Or is this something we want to try to put our heads together of, the town can afford X amount through the general fund and it's a good investment in an asset that we always are going to own due to the deed restriction? Or is this just not the right time, given we want to see what happens with the school first? Those are kind of the ways to think about this.
My advice to the Recreation Department is, put an application in, even if it's late, you know, and make them turn you down. You know,
How many turf fields do either St. Mark's or Fay have?
I do not know the answer to
Do we
that.
have any?
There are definitely some,
St. Mark's has one
Has one?
next to the library.
yeah.
There's also fields right at the
Over
high
in
school, yeah. in
Marlborough,
Marlborough,
there,
yeah.
right.
Those are not
They're turf?
turf.
Non-turf.
They are not,
Turf?
no, but My kids play sports over there. The
We
youth
think
sports
just
leagues
one
rent them
turf
out.
is what we think St. Mark's has.
Yeah.
The Choke Fund that every year awards a tiny little grant to do something that's a one-time thing, playground, whatever, I assume has $200,000-300,000 in it, given what they.
I don't have
award. So I don't
access
think
to
it's got
that.
much in it.
That's a combination. That actually is for a variety of functions, including recreation. So I can't remember the number, but there's a modest amount of money in there, but the
But there's a
spend,
piece for
but the
recreation.
spend rate out of there is pretty small. Like,
It's
2
5
or
or 6,000
3%,
bucks, but
something
it's
like
probably worth looking at. Maybe you just have to put together 10 or
So
5 or
so
10
let me
things.
ask at least the select board members, and then obviously if Andrew wants to pull advisory, is there anyone that wants to just not further pursue this right this second, or do you want us to continue to do due diligence, take Al's suggestion, do other things?
You think we need this field, correct?
I think if you don't do this, my personal opinion, if you don't do this field now, you're not doing it until the Neary School opens in 2028.
And we're in tight position for field space then.
Yeah, I mean, you
During
have
that-
user
during
groups.
That entire time.
Like, just use the example I just gave. My kids are very young. They don't require a lot of space to play on fields. The youth sports leagues are renting space from Fay in the spring to go to Marlborough, as an example, because we
Yeah,
can't,
yeah.
as a town, provide
Yeah.
that space. The good news is, and I've confirmed this with the superintendent, I think we have an untapped opportunity over at Algonquin now with that new Gonkplex. Like, they are making that facility available to leagues, and because it is turf, they're gonna be able to use it in March. So we do have space that I think will come online. I do not believe, though,
Yeah.
even if that becomes fully available to our leagues outside of the high school athletics, that it is gonna solve the needs that are there. So,
Yeah, I'm in favor of a specific plan. Say, give us a plan. Here's something that could work, that has multiple funding sources maybe.
Yeah, but I think we got to work with them, because
Oh,
we
yeah.
know some things
Yep.
they don't know.
Yep.
So we should work with, somebody here should work with Travis and who's the chair? Is Jen still the chair, right?
Jen, yep, and Don Dumont's been very involved as
Yeah,
well.
and let's see what we can come up with. Why are you saying that if we don't do it this year, the next time to do it would be the year that Neary opens? If
You're
Neary
not
goes-
gonna be able to afford to have those fields offline while you have the Neary fields
Okay.
offline.
You lose the,
Too much,
Okay.
unless you magically find and build another field in town somewhere else in the meantime, which,
So 2 questions, and I'm going to go to the place we're not supposed to go, but could you just review what fields we're actually going to lose if we build a new Neary? And I assume these are generally going to be temporary losses.
there'd be temporary losses. So the fields, that if you're in the front of Neary and you're looking to the right,
Yeah.
that's where the youth soccer usually
Yep.
is,
I
and
know
there's a
well.
softball field over there as well. That is what we would lose. So it's,
What's going to happen there that's,
you'll likely have the construction trailers
Staging.
over there.
yeah.
And it will not be a safe environment you will not want kids and people around that area.
The field right in front of Lundblad. would
Lundblad is
be
still
open.
usable.
The Petrie's the one right in front of the school, right? Lundblad's
Okay.
on top of the landfill, right?
Yeah.
I forgot that, right?
DePietri, the
Our goal as a Neary Building Committee is to keep DePietri open during the construction.
Okay, so I'm confused again. Where is DePietri?
DePietri is
Come in
literally
from the west.
outside the front of the build. If you're driving into Neary,
Okay,
It's
all
the-
right.
it's
Between
across the-
Lundblad and the school, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then where we had the 2 town meetings is what we're talking about will be closed.
you'll have to
Southborough
have,
Summer Nights area
yeah.
is where these other fields.
you'll have to have construction trailers over there, no doubt.
Okay.
But they will be restored, and Recreation's not proposing a project over
that's
there.
also where you're putting a chunk of the leach fields, so,
Yeah,
okay. All right.
yeah.
The second question I guess I have is, as an alternative, should we be talking to Fay and St. Mark's about renting, or maybe they could assist us in some way, their facilities?
There
I
are
mean,
discussions already underway about a lot of things with each school, and it's not something to be discussed tonight. We are waiting for answers to
Understood.
things. Andrew?
Yeah, but I think, Al, to your point, I think, there are spaces there that we're not currently renting, that if this is for a couple year period of time until the Neary fields are back online, I just can't see spending $3.2 million, especially because we're going to get rid of an existing field that's already there. I mean, if this was a net new field, I think I need to see the full the full analysis on how much we're really, when I listened to the capital meeting, it sounded like it was, we're using it for 30 hours a week and we should be using it for 20. And I think it doesn't sound like it's.
Say that again,
We have
Andrew. Well, I don't understand what your issue is.
The issue with Choate Field and why they want to put turf in is because it's getting kind of beaten up because they're using it too much. But it doesn't sound like they're using it for an extra maybe 10 hours a week or whatever the number was, like off the top of my head. So we're basically going to take a existing field offline to then put in a turf field versus say finding a new location to put a turf field in and then adding a field to our inventory. And if this is just because we're losing the fields for a couple of years at Neary, I think we should talk to our partners at Fay and St. Mark's or elsewhere in town. I used to play soccer in front of Ken's. Maybe we can go back to doing that and, try to do something temporarily for two or 3 years while the school is being built. But I think this $3.2 million number with all the fiscal issues we have is a scary one.
Well, it's not 3.2. It's going to be less. Right? We need to be fair to recreation. We're presenting the total cost, but they are not proposing taxpayers take on 3.2 million, regardless of whether it's CPA or general fund.
All right, so we can't expect rec to really figure this out on their own. So Andrew, anyone from advisory be willing to raise their hand to work on this with someone from select board with rec?
Yeah, you can probably include me and I'll go around and see if anybody else wants to get included as well.
Okay, anybody select board want to raise their hand to? I do. Okay, I do. Okay, I gave you a chance.
Okay.
And I think the other thing before I move on from this item is, this item has been talked about since 2020. This has nothing to do with Neary. The timing is just, they were going to bring it forward next year, not this year.
And I
So-
agree, well, we've heard about this for a long, long time.
Yeah,
All
so-
right, so let's see what we can come up with as far as the better answer here
Yeah,
by Andrew Pfaff and I working with rec directly and seeing how creative we can be here.
As much as it makes sense from a phasing standpoint to handle it this year, I just think it's part of the overall, it's hard not to analyze this without thinking about the Neary building project and just the overall appetite for spending on big projects. So I think, Andrew spoke to some of my concerns, and it's almost better to just try to jerry-rig a solution for a couple of years.
And there are conversations with the private schools that could impact this too. So there's just a lot of moving parts here. So I think we've done all we can do tonight as far as this one.
you're aware, and we'll keep going and look for that.
Kristen Levant, I think, wants to come over and say something. Is she has her hand up still? Vanessa? Yep. Kristen, when you're there, we're ready.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Kristen Laval, 12 Southwood Drive. I am a member of the Recreation Commission, but speaking as a private citizen tonight. I joined in, honestly, to listen in. I wasn't expecting to hear such an in-depth discussion on the turf field tonight, so I was a little surprised that we didn't have Recreation Commission representation, only because there are some, Andrew, for example, to your point, no, we're absolutely not concerned.
We can't hear you. So Kristen, you are no longer hearable. All right, let's go on until.
I wanted to chime in that I'm a little disappointed that this conversation didn't include more CPC and Recreation Commission involvement. I think it would have been a much more clear conversation. I'm glad to hear that you're electing representatives to meet with the commission, and I would hope that future conversations would ensure that we have representation from all committees involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're just bringing forward the items that were brought to us, so
That's right.
understood. Last item, it's certainly the largest, but I think it has an easier story to it, is the Trotter roof. This has been on the capital plan. This is the year it was slated to be replaced. Here's some good news. The school has already been awarded through the MSBA funding for this. If it proceeds beyond the feasibility stage, it would be about a 36+% match on this right now. So the 5.8 is the fully loaded cost, so we would get 36% of it back. There is a timing issue here too. They're in feasibility right now. Depending on whether feasibility and they get approved to go to the next step, pre or post town meeting, will dictate whether we can actually carry this article at town meeting or have to wait for a subsequent town meeting. But there also are timing requirements of when we can and have to approve the funding to stay in the MSBA process. It's convoluted. I do not bring, there's a very specific timeline. So I think what we need to understand now is if there are any more details that anyone wants to hear on why the roof needs to be replaced at this point. But the good news is we do expect a match. We are going to have to stay very close on the timing of whether this can go into the article. We expect it should be at the article, but it's going to require the feasibility to be done first, which Greg and his team are very much underway with already.
So, a couple of quick questions on this one. We did some major repairs to the roof about 20 years ago, and I'm trying to remember, I think Trottier is now just about 25 years old. And I'm assuming it'll still be a year or two before construction starts. So we're sneaking up on 30. That it happens. And you can get a 36% match. That's not terrible. That's pretty good.
Why is it not 3984?
I said 36% plus because I think the numbers they use change
Okay.
as you've
Okay.
become way too aware of. So,
Weeds.
that's what we've used for calculating the estimated bond, which you'll see on the next couple of slides, but it's a healthier number than what we're going to get for any school project, is what I'll say.
Yeah, I think as we really need is a 30-year plan. And, every 20 years, 25 years, you pencil in a school roof for each building we're responsible for. And
Which unfortunately Finn and Woodward are not too long out there. And the good news is with the quotes they're getting 30-year roofs. So then we know once we've hit each of these 4 buildings in some way, shape, or form, regardless of whether it's a school or a municipal building, then we know that's our 30-year plan. So we'll be able to accomplish that through the numbers we have.
So the 10-year plan that we do have, neither Woodward or Finn have a roof in it, right?
They do.
They do, okay. Both?
They do, both. Look, some of you were at the scene back in around 2000. You put all these schools, they built them up from the ground in and around that same time, so they're all now 25 to 30 years old at the same time.
I lived through the baby boom. These are baby boomlet schools. And
For which we got a 63% reimbursement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are our big ticket items. Obviously, we have some work to do on all of them, but just so you're aware. Next slide, please. So this is the item that we started to show at the last meeting, but we showed maybe the next slide. This is our outlook for things we've already approved. So there's no going back on what you see on this slide right here. This is where we've been and where we're going. As you can tell, we, right now are at our lowest point. We do see a small uptick next year, but then, we go down again. So the one thing to just keep in mind as we move forward is, we have a tough 26 and 27 due to that increase, and then it does drop again. So I think this was acknowledged at the last meeting is, regardless of where you stand on the school project, this is the best time we've ever had to be considering this, just from a pure debt perspective. I realize there are a ton of operational considerations, but again, this is things we can't go back on. The majority of that general fund item is, at least half of it is the public safety building. The rest are miscellaneous projects, including some of those short-term items we talked about previously.
the total debt is less than $30 million right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now I'm not including pension and OPEB, I'm calling truly bonded debt, right? And if you're supposed to keep less than 5%, so Al, here's your number, so 3.8 billion is our equalized value, we're less than 1%.
Well, there are a couple other numbers that are coming out of this review, so.
Right, okay, so I'm
We're gonna,
just-
we're,
I'm-
and
I'm
in fact, we're gonna
giving
have,
the other side of that one, all right.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's no question, this is, if we were ever going to take on a big project, we are in the right place, because the Algonquin debt is rolling off, and, you know, our baby boom at school debts are rolling off. This,
Well, be careful with Algonquin, because remember, the plan is to replace the school debt with the complex debt. They did that on purpose, so that it doesn't really roll off, it just kind of keeps going.
It
I don't know
levels
what the
off.
numbers are.
Percentage-wise, it'll reduce, but yes, dollar for dollar, it's not too far off. The big thing was you had that litigation settlement that dropped off last year too, right? So that went away, at least from a capital perspective.
The schools
At-
are all-
at
the
the
schools
risk-
are all paid for now, except for Algonquin, that's got 2 more years, I believe. And then we pick up, you know, they perm finance the athletic complex. But no, we are in excellent shape debt-wise today.
We can fix that.
For now, that's right.
All right, next slide, please. So this is the slide that we showed last time. We have it going as far out as you want it. But this shows all the big ticket items that people have suggested that we should do in the next, 5 to 10 years. You'll see on here both groups we just talked about in terms of Woodward and Finn. You'll see all the projects we've already talked about tonight. I think we can all acknowledge that there is no way we are going to be able to go from a $2 or $3 million debt load on a given year going through the general fund to go as high as 9 5 years from now. We are certainly going to go north of 3, right? Even if we do nothing with the schools, like we're going north of 3, and that is probably the right answer. But we are going to have tough decisions as a community of what we want to support and not support, and also realize that these projects are not going to all come forward at the same time. So we need to think about, as a collective group here, both Select Board Advisory and Capital, how we want to present this as part of any town meeting, whether it be the annual where we're presenting a budget, or the special where we're presenting a one-time capital item. But we do believe that once you get beyond these projects, there's no other items that we are aware of that have been brought forward to us outside of this 10-year window, other than a roof at Algonquin. And we don't think that falls within this window.
The Woodward conversion?
This would be to make it age appropriate when we move kindergarten, pre-K, and first grade over there.
Okay.
They've got
So
it.
it doesn't include the community center, right?
Just not,
That's Finn.
so
It's in there?
well, we don't have that in there, because remember, as we talked a little bit about with
Like
the,
10? 10 million?
well, so when I came here with my community center hat on, I fully acknowledge I gave you a $14 million number, right? That was everyone wanting something. Senior center, basically gutting that building and giving them exactly everything they wanted. Library having some sort of extra space, and recreation getting a significant amount of space. That was, right, and there were representatives from each of those committees on there. What we now need to do as part of the NERI project, which Kathy and I are coordinating on, is what is reality there? And what would we do on day one? What would be our 5-year plan, and what would be our 10-year plan? There are some departments that have said and continue to say, like recreation, we can move in on day one, right? They could take over that gym and do amazing things with their programming and a few extra classrooms. The seniors, right, we have ongoing dialogues of, is there a home Corderville Hall? Is there a home Finn School? And what is the, pros, cons of that outside of cost? And then you have to get into costing. So you're right, we do not have significant costs in here for a community center. We also need to acknowledge, for example, on NERI, we're going to have a new number before we go to town meeting as well. That may or may not be that same number. And obviously, some of these projects just may fall by the wayside as well.
So the community center is just too speculative at this point for the number to put in here?
Yeah, I honestly, Andrew, if everyone got what they wanted, yeah, we're at the $14 million number that Community Center Committee went for. I don't know that people are asking for what they were asking for back then, so I don't think we should be scaring people at this point with that number. I think it's incumbent upon all of us that we have a plan for what Finn's going to look like for at least 5 years when we go to town meeting on the Neary project.
Because if we don't, we're going to get asked that question, and we've got to have an answer for it, I believe.
That building, absent a roof, is safe to move in day one. It may not be perfectly situated. Let's just say some department sets up an office there. Those classrooms are between 800 and 1,000 square feet each. It'll look a lot nicer than what a lot of people are currently working in, right? Do you do some fixes up over time as the budget allows for it? That is a plausible solution here if there are offices. But we need to remember, the Finn discussion is not driving the Neary discussion. We need to let the educational part of that drive it. So that is the only thing, fair caveat, that will get added to this if it becomes an actual project. I think it's speculation of whether it's actually a project beyond the roof at this point.
So can we focus this as an example on fiscal year 2030?
Yep.
If Neary goes through, it's totally built at that point. That's your perm bond. I don't know what you take out of this, Jason, out of the $10 million that totals, other than possibly Choate, but that's only $350. So you're still talking, $9,650,000 of debt service. You got to do these roofs. You got to fix the culverts, right? The library. They're going to hear in the next couple of weeks about that, so we'll know soon whether they got into that program. But a lot of people want the library program to happen, right, Marguerite? So I don't know how you get down to the number you said a minute ago. I mean, you're starting off with 2.2 is already done, right? And then
Yeah, where we're starting is just not fair, right? Like,
What?
where we're starting is not fair. We're in such a great position right now that any increase looks enormous.
But maybe if there's any good news in this, the good news is once you get there, it's steady from that point on. And so, yeah, there's a
declining.
jump, all right, but then it doesn't continue to jump, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but I mean, we need to
Kathy,
acknowledge there will be,
Andrew, go ahead.
I say, Kathy, what we're missing here is, and to Al's point and his memo, we are missing a big chunk of other infrastructure, right? We got two sinkhole projects here, right? We probably have what? A few hundred yards worth of projects and all the miles of roads and culverts we have in this town. That plan to say, but we could have $2-3 million a year for the next 20 years to repair what we've been not investing in for the last 30 years.
I agree. So what's not here is Bill's road plan, right? As
Correct.
far as what we've got to do these sidewalks we want to do, to fix these long roads that need a whole lot of work. So I agree that's not in here too. Okay, so
Yeah.
I am,
Corderville Road project, right? That's not in here. Yeah.
that's not in there because we've been told it's being explored as a tip, so.
Yeah. Just that's the one that scares me is that we have $100 million of infrastructure that's going to need to be replaced probably in the next 15, 20 years. That
where are you getting your 100 million?
wasn't that what Al had in his memo?
So just my very, very, very rough estimate, and I'm going to try and make a better one, is that if we had to replace all of the assets that we currently own that are in the ground, it's on the order of $250 million.
But how do you know that, Al? What have you done to come up with that number? That's a scary number to throw out without truly doing a lot of work to get to it,
Well, I'll tell you what I did, and again, this is very rough. And I'm going to actually sit down with Bill and see if we can't get a little more detail on it. But, I sat down with Bill and asked why these culverts cost so much, and he unfortunately knew what he was talking about and explained to us how the state has given us lots of favors in terms of changing the requirements. I looked at the number of miles of roads we have, a rough estimate of the number of miles of drainage system we have. I used the number of $1.5 million a mile to put that stuff in the ground. And, that's how I sort of, this is reality. Now, could I make that number better refined? Yes. But it's not going to be less than, it's going to be some number of millions, and that some number is going to be 3 digits. So it's going to be a 9-digit number. And we have to replace that. You know, even if these assets last 100 years, we are talking about a non-trivial sum of money every year to replace and repair the physical assets that we have in the ground, and the requirements to do that are becoming more stringent. So to give you an example, you know, in 1960, when we put a culvert in, we put a steel pipe in. Now we've got to put an engineered structure in that allows for a natural base, which means we have to pour footings, and then we have to put essentially a 3-sided box or a half circle in that's, again, engineered. And so that's, you know, an order of magnitude more expensive than putting in a concrete pipe, which, you know, was what we did in the past. It worked really well, but the state is now mandating that we do these sorts of things. We know, for example, that we have a expensive repair on Atwood that could be 6 figures. We know that the culvert on Parkerville that crosses the reservoir, that is the stream there, that culvert is not in great shape, and it's going to need replacing. And, you know, we shouldn't, we can't bury our heads in the sand in here and sort of hope. And I know the board doesn't want to do that, but I'll let Bill opine in more detail.
Good evening. Al is correct. It's a little premature for me to put numbers out until I do more data gathering. So I would say probably in the next year to 2 years, I'll probably have a better picture as to what we need to do. You know, we did a pavement management plan. That's just the surface view. This doesn't get into the underground infrastructure with the drainage and the culverts and water lines and gas lines and repairs that need to be done. Al touched on Parkerville Road. We just paved Parkerville Road. I got a report from the state for an inspection on the culvert that goes for the Sudbury Reservoir. And there's sections of pipe that are off-center about 6 inches, so there's exposed soil from each section of pipe. It's not in great shape. So the logic is, why would you pave a road over a pipe that's not up to standard? Okay.
So you wouldn't have done it that way. You would have made sure, you would have looked at the pipes first.
We would have approached it with an educated decision, knowing what we had left for life, you know, instead of, I want to get in a planning perspective instead of a reactive perspective. These culverts that we have issues with, we're reacting to, which is never a good situation to be in. And I think that's what Al's point is ultimately, is we want to plan for proper maintenance on our infrastructure. The pavement management plan that we did is really intended to give us a prioritization to get our roads up to a basic level of standard that's expected from the taxpayers. And we're not there. We're well below that. So in order to get up there, we're going to have to invest some capital and then move forward on the maintenance aspect, which will be a less expensive approach, but the front end is going to be heavy on the capital.
But you think it's going to take a while to put together a detailed plan with numbers in it that would do what Al just described as far as truly understanding the cost to do the underground piece, do the above-ground piece, the whole thing?
Al's plan is much more empirical than I would do. I like the details, so I like to know what the pipes look like, and then I could give you a better idea. But for a budgetary planning tool, Al has a good approach. Then we could get more refined as we move forward with the inspections with the pipes and taking into account the pavement management plan and those sorts of things.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, I know we spent a lot of time on this, but just one thing which we didn't talk about and wanted to follow up on. We did use ARPA money to do, to commit to contracts for the design of certain sidewalk extensions, right? And I think we've got some people excited about those projects eventually coming to the point where we'll get the designs, right? And then we're in a position where we can put them out to bid and actually, are we still collectively thinking about doing that? Roughly, have we thought about roughly how much money that would cost, and should it be into our long-term, medium-term plans as well? And where are we in the process of, I know we, under the ARPA rules, we got to contractually commit, we could sign the contracts by the end of last year. We got to spend it next year, right?
The contracts
26.
for the sidewalks
Yep.
are in place. The
Yep.
designs, the surveys for all the locations have been done, field
Okay.
surveys.
Yep.
The designs are ongoing currently. So we're probably approaching 50% design on all of those. We'll be done, if not by the end of the year, by the end of this fiscal year, I would imagine early spring, we'd probably have something, including costs for each of
Yeah.
those locations.
Okay. So that we'll have costs
Yes,
in the near-term horizon, and then we can make decisions about what we'd want to do. and
That's right.
When.
that's right.
Okay, thanks.
Trying to be impressed. What, Larry?
I'm sorry, yeah. Based on what Al said, it seems to me that we're looking at, another, $4 million, of culverts and sinkholes next
Year.
year and the year after and the year after. And the question is, are we being too short-sighted in the way we're planning to fund this? I mean, should we be looking at a $15 million 30-year bond and start building up that reserve so that we're not going back every year and saying, oh, well, we need another $4 million now? Should we be looking out a few years? Because it sounds like it's going to be a lot of money, and it's going to keep coming up every year. We're going to be having the same discussion in January of 2026 about, do we want to fix some pothole on Flag Road that fell in last week? So, I think maybe we need a longer-term view of this particular problem.
I agree with that. So I don't think we should spend any more time on this tonight. So thank you, Bill, for trying to help us understand. We really probably have a big piece missing from here.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to my initial comments that we need to figure out what we're doing with road maintenance, and obviously that's above and below grade. Next slide. So here are kind of what we need to focus on in terms of, and this has all come out through the discussion already, but this is kind of how we get from here to town meeting and recommendations, and obviously knowing that you need to take votes ahead of time. The water rate impact, we need to understand that to weigh in on the capital part. It obviously looks like a huge jump overnight, but you may tell us the water rates can support it without sort of a massive increase. I don't know. So we need some help there. Sinkhole culverts, look, I think been eye-opening for all of us as we've gone through this process. We need to think out something that isn't just Southborough funding these, right? And that's obviously where all of you can at least start to grease the tires and figure out where we can go. We know what we're going to have to do in terms of schools, regardless of whether NERI or anything else. We know what the state funds us. We know what the state funds us on regular road maintenance through Chapter 90. This is a new issue that none of us have faced in any of our roles with the town. And then just the timing of the Trotter roof, I think it'll be important to stay coordinated with the school administration. If that project is amenable to all of you, that we make sure we take advantage of the MSBA program. Again, first-time application that got accepted. That doesn't happen in either of the programs we're in now, and somehow it happened with the roof. So they saw something in terms of the leaks and the other parts that are already there that allowed it to rise to the top of their funding formula with the other cities and towns that were granted entrance.
So I would add choke to this key items to focus on, right?
Yeah.
On that uplifting note. All right, any further questions for capital? we're not voting on anything tonight. This is just for us to understand what's on the table and to take that into our budget summit on the 25th and then continue to discuss.
So, other than adding Choate to that, I think depending on what questions you all have, do you need us back and what do you need us back with is going to be, you don't have to answer that tonight, but like, what do you need from us? But two, clearly that appropriation number is too high, right? So as you go through the broader discussions with Brian and the team, and as you start looking at department heads and where you're going to keep and where you're going to cut, we need guidance of, hey, capital, you need to be no greater than 1.5 of capital appropriations. You need to be no greater than 1.2. And then we'll work with the department heads to come back and say, if you want that, here's what it would mean to service, right? Like just because Bill happens to be here, if we had to cut one of his trucks, he should be able to articulate this is what would happen with plowing or other routine items. There wasn't many other departments, like if we decided against one of the facilities projects, what would John do in the meantime with those projects? What does it mean? What's the inflation? So that everyone's eyes wide open. Are we trying to hit a number, or are we trying to do what's financially prudent in the short and medium and long term?
Andrew, is advisory here in total tonight?
There's a quorum.
I know quorum, but are you all here?
No.
No.
Who's not here? How many are you missing?
Tim, Adam, and
Barry and Marcy are here. Larry's here, you're here, that's 4.
yep,
Howard, where's Howard?
Howard, yep.
He's not here?
Howard Strappa. Howard's not here.
Howard is here?
No.
So you're missing
We have
3 out of
4.
7?
We have
I
4
don't
out
know
of
what else
7.
you're going to say on the 25th that you haven't said tonight is my point, but you've got 3 advisory members that didn't hear it.
There's always a recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that they couldn't make it, they can all watch it, but I think the 25th is more, be able to cover off some of these bigger ones with our department heads and go line by line like we have before and say, this is what you submitted, what can we try to
It's
whittle down?
operating budget though, right?
You're talking operating or capital, Andrew?
When we meet to talk about the budget, we cover capital and we cover operating, every time.
That's not how we did it last year. Last year, we came into capital up front. We made our recommendation. I think
Correct.
there was a few outlying questions that you then asked the department heads later in the day.
Yeah. That's what I'm
So-
saying. Like, we talked to the chief about the ladder truck, and we talked to Bill about some of the DPW items in more detail.
Okay, but my point is, I don't see why capital would come.
Yeah, I don't think capital needs to come. I'm just saying we might touch on capital items.
Okay.
So it sounds like we need to have a discussion to answer your question about, do we want to focus on a number or some other guidance? I mean, I think along the lines of how, when we were on advisory, when there was kind of a summer time where you had some time to work on kind of longer term, I think it would be interesting at capital to take a look at, what Larry was talking about, the feasibility of issuing a bond that would take, in an amount to knock off a lot of the big sinkhole culvert projects over the next 10, 15 years. What would be a recommended amount?
But you got to have the projects ready to go. You're not going to float a bond unless you've got the project. I mean, you can definitely float a bond for roads, right? 'Cause you know what roads to do, but to do the sinkholes, you got to have,
Okay.
the sinkholes have to be ready to
We can
fix.
come up with a plan,
Yeah.
Not this year, this would be for next year. And certainly, we can come up with a plan.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not even convinced you need to have a specific set of projects to float the bond.
Well, you don't want to float a bond unless you're going to spend the money. You don't want
Well,
to sit there paying
you have
debt.
a purpose for spending the money, because, the one thing we know for sure
We got plenty of projects.
is.
You don't float a bond, borrow the money, and start paying the interest unless you know you're going to spend the money. You don't keep it sitting in the bank.
So I spoke to Brian about this a little bit. You do the interim financing to the bond, so that, you're not paying interest on things you don't have to. So there's a lot of details that have to be worked out, but we don't necessarily have to have an identified list of projects, because, as Sam says, we got no shortage of things, and you know, what you do is you actually float the bond at the end of
If you can end up with a
Right.
line of credit type facility that you can pull on as you need it, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But let's not,
effectively.
okay, so as far as process, I don't see any reason to come on the 25th. We'll talk to department heads, mainly Bill, about their request as far as any other specific requests. The other 3 advisory members can watch this to see what you guys said, so they'll take care of that. I mean, we've got some big operational things to get through, too. Police department wants a huge increase in manpower, huge increase in salaries. Fire wants quite a bit, so we've got to get through that, too, before we decide where we want to end up. So we don't know where we want to end up yet.
So you know where to find us. I will remind you with each of those operational increases will come capital items on police and fire. So just make sure you're factoring that into any decisions as well, because some, like the deputy car, are being carried in our plan. Some, like additional police cruisers, are not in our long-term plan. We have 2 a year. So if you add officers, you're going to have to add cars because you're not going to have enough cars for them to occupy.
Thank you. I think you've done an excellent job.
Let me just make, so you know that Chief Newell has asked for, is it 6 new policemen for fiscal year '26? Something like that. So what vehicles they need are not part of this plan, correct?
We have 2 in our plan for now, but, I mean, Chief Newell has been very clear that obviously as they increase staffing, there's additional need, especially when you're adding, like you just added a lieutenant, right? I don't know if that lieutenant has a take-home car too, like the other lieutenant had, right? So I think there's just, you naturally have more officers on the road, which creates more miles on the vehicle, which makes them need to turn them over quicker than they currently are.
Okay, thank you.
I think I lost my quorum at some point during then, so I don't think I need to adjourn. Vanessa, can you just confirm that Joe's gone?
He did send a text.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. All right, so I am good.
Jason,
Thank you. Let us know what you need.
Steve,
Thank you.
nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next time, we'll look for the magic answer.
Yeah, next time you just,
I wish we had.
All right, let's do reports. So I'll start out with Neary. Okay, so what I wanted to make sure everybody understands, put on your calendar if you could, February 7th. It's a Friday. I don't know what time yet. So we're going to end up with 2 new estimates of the cost of the project on February 5th. So this time, we've got the original estimator, he's going to do one, and then the OPM is going to do a second one.
I'm sorry, February 5 or February 7?
7th is a Friday, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you agree? So
Yep.
the 5th is when we're going to have the info, so the Neary Building Committee Finance Subcommittee, of which Andrew Pfaff and I are part of, have 2 days to turn around what they give us and be ready to deal with it on that Friday and be ready for the full committee on the following Monday. So what's important to understand is we're going to have 2 new estimates that are going to be done by the current estimator who did the estimates we're working with right now, and then the OPM does their own independent estimate. They sit down together, they reconcile the differences, and come forth with one reconciled estimate that will be given to the Finance Subcommittee for that meeting on the 7th. That is the number that will go to town meeting. We don't expect to have any further adjustments to that number after that. There will be once you start, if the project is approved and then you go out to bid, et cetera. But until then, the number that the town will be shown at town meeting will come out of that February 5th, February 7th estimates. All right? Any questions on that as far as process goes? So to the extent you can tune into that meeting, it'd be helpful. I think you'll hear a lot of stuff that maybe you haven't heard before as far as how the grant works, et cetera. And then the Neary Building Committee will come back in front of the select board to basically discuss that after that meeting. Okay? And then town meeting. All right, Andrew, one-stop grant?
So as an update to what I said at our last meeting in December about the one-stop grant process, where at the meeting in December, I reported that I participated in a meeting with the Westborough Planning Director and with Leah Emerson, and we put the question to Westborough whether they'd be interested in collaborating on a regional, or the 2 of us going in on a one-stop application for a Route 9 corridor study, and at that time we were waiting to hear back. So the good news is Westborough is interested, and Leah and her counterpart in Westborough are actually scheduled to meet this Friday to talk about kind of the next steps about the contents of the application. So I'll just continue to keep everyone posted on that. And another quick report, on a Saturday evening, last Saturday evening, I presented on behalf of the board a proclamation to Ryan Boy, who achieved the rank of Eagle Scout.
Great. Andrew Pfaff, do you want to go ahead and adjourn advisory? You're welcome to stay, but
Yep. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Larry
Larry,
says
yeah.
yes.
All right, roll call vote. Larry?
Aye.
Marcy?
Aye.
Barry?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. All right. Okay, Al, wastewater update?
So we met with the DPW or the DEP, excuse me, on Monday. I had a very productive and useful meeting. We continue to gather a lot of information about what it's going to take to implement a wastewater plan for Route 9. So far, no one has told us that this is a terrible idea and that we're crazy. Well, that's a separate matter. The sort of intermediate step is to work towards developing what's called an integrated plan, which is an actual sort of actionable plan for building something. It's the plan that would then trigger going out to bring somebody in to actually build to develop a plan for a specific wastewater treatment plan. So, and we have a number of the components of the steps, but there's a lot of technical stuff. We did find out that, if we want to do a regional approach, it becomes more complex because of something called basin management, but it's a minor detail. The next period of time, I think we need to start focusing on geography, that is, in other words, specifics, where you might put waste collection lines. We learned a lot about where you shouldn't put collection lines, like on the margins of road that will then be covered by snow. And we're going to brief the Board of Health, because I think at this point we could probably use some of their expertise in terms of soil absorption. And we are going to begin to have at least, incredibly preliminary discussions with some of the major stakeholders along Route 9 to see, because at the end of the day, they're going to use the system and they're going to have to pay for big chunks of it. So we want to make sure that, they're on board with what we're doing. So we continue to make progress. I'm going to suggest that on the 21st, we actually place this on other matters so that we can have a more fulsome discussion and have a presentation for what we've done to date and sort of talk about how we move forward. But, we are making sort of steady progress. Sam, do you have anything to add there?
Nope, a lot of moving parts, but still some possibilities out there. And again, it's expensive, but if you do it right, there's the possibility that you could generate additional commercial tax base along Route 9. So that's the goal.
I will add that there's one option which may be very appealing to this board, which is it might be possible, and again, this is in the realm of long shots, but they're all long shots at the moment, that this could all be done privately. And if it's done privately, that, we might be some form of a public-private partnership, but that would ease, our funding burden, placing it elsewhere. But that is something that we're going to continue to poke at.
I think that's a great thing to poke at. Okay, thank you, Al. Mark, you don't have a report on the rec? Okay. All right, consent agenda, we got three things. We got minutes, we've got, and then for some reason, Kristen LeVault's appointment to the Highland Committee was off. So all we're doing is making her the same as everybody else, which is 3025, which is the charge of the committee when it ends. Okay. All right, anybody have an issue with any of the minutes
I got a few typos.
for A and B?
A,
Okay, anybody have an issue with B?
Nope.
Okay, we're only going to vote to approve. We're not going to release those. This is just vote to approve. Okay, so let's do B and C. We'll come back to A.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so I'll make a motion to approve consent agenda items B and C.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, Sam?
Small items on the 17th of December, line 66, members instead of member. And line 116, Mr. Lavoie's name is misspelled. And at the end of line 284, upcoming meeting dates were in 2024 instead of 25.
Which line?
Line 284. Just a cut and paste from the last one. So. Otherwise, the usual good job.
Yep, she does a great job. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from December 17th, 2024 as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, other matters. So select board office hours for the next 3 months, including next week, January 14th, February 11th, and March 11th. Anybody have any specific dates they want to do, those three?
I'm open to any of them, but happy if others do them. So.
And let's start with January 14th. I cannot do the 14th. So who wants to do the January 14th next week?
I can do the 14th.
Okay, so Marguerite, Ann, and Al. Okay, February 11th.
I can do those.
You can do the 11th?
Vanessa, do you know when the next Tricentennial Committee meetings, or if that conflicts with, we haven't got it? Okay,
Okay, so I'll do that one with you.
okay.
Okay. March 11th, Sam, you want to do that one?
I could do March 11th.
Okay,
Yeah.
and who wants to do the 11th with Sam?
We do 6 PM, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you got it? Vanessa and Mark? All right, so January 14th is Marguerite and Al. February 11th is Andrew and Kathy, and March 11th is Sam and Marguerite. All right, tree warden. So this is a two-part agenda item. We can only do one tonight because the governor, as far as we know, has not actually signed the changes to the special act that we had requested at the annual town meeting last year. It's got to the legislature, it's sitting on our desk, he apparently has 10 days to sign it, and if I do the count, today is the at least 9th day, so hopefully it gets signed by tomorrow. So we will do the second part on the 21st, just to be perfectly legal here. But what we can do is talk about the stipend for the newly to-be-appointed tree warden. And Mr. Cundiff was so kind to send us a well-written memo about what he would recommend as far as the stipend goes. So you want to explain, Bill, where?
Sure. As you know, currently the tree warden designee is in the DPW, so, I work closely with Chris and have some level of familiarity with the level of effort that's put in for the duties associated with the tree warden. And I'll tell you, my experience with other towns is it's disproportionately high with the level of administrative work that's required that falls upon the tree warden, as you might expect. So what I did in my memo, I asked Tammy to go through the last annual town meetings and illustrate a trend as to what the stipend was for the position. And for the past 15 years to 17 years, it's been $4,000 a year. And the majority of those years, there was also money for a part-time person to assist the tree warden. Currently, we don't have a part-time person assisting the tree warden. So my proposal, given a number of things, including the level of effort that's now required with the joint hearings, which historically they did not do with the planning board, and the paperwork associated with the applications that go forth before the planning board, easily the workload has doubled for the tree warden designee. So the recommendation I have in the memo is to increase that stipend from $4,000 to $8,000 a year. Now, I do have one caveat. I said, and I've spoken to Chris about this, the workload would decrease some if the board considered rescinding your shade tree policy. So if that's something that you wanted to consider, we would certainly think that the value in there would be the level of effort associated with the tasks. So,
All right, so we're talking fiscal year '26. Vanessa, help me here. So this is on the SAP as a stipend, so it's got to run through the SAP. So we got work to be done here before town meeting to get this done. That's why we need to decide tonight, or at least very soon, so that the process can start to get it onto the warrant for fiscal year '26.
correct.
So we're kind of stuck with 4 until July 1st,
Understood.
right? So what does everyone think about Bill's recommendation to double the stipend as of 7/1/25?
I'm okay. I mean, I've seen it work, and it's a lot of work.
I don't think there's any doubt it's a lot of work.
I think it's long overdue, actually.
Why do we have this as a stipend on the SAP versus just part of the DPW budget? Because anytime you change it, you got to go through this laborious process to do it, instead of, she's looking at you,
Here he is.
Vanessa is.
Oh, I was turning it on to do just that, but yeah. So historically, it has been someone from DPW because we've had the expertise. You know, I'd love to think Chris is going to be here forever, right? And, you know, right now, that's where we have it. But if you put it in the collective bargaining agreement and take it out of the SAP, it will work until we no longer have that expertise in the DPW. And then we have to remove it from the collective bargaining agreement. It's easier to put something in than it is to take something out of a collective bargaining agreement. So keeping it in the stipend, while a little bit clunky because this board needs to approve, then personnel board needs to approve, and town meeting needs to amend the bylaw, it gives you the most latitude as to who may be doing that work for you. It doesn't necessarily have to be a DPW employee, although historically it has been.
So does Chris do this work on top of his 40 hours?
He does. He comes in on nights to have the hearings, and he's out there on weekends sometimes when we have calls for limbs coming down. And granted, there's some level of overlap in duties and responsibility. But when you can knock off those 2 birds with 1 person, those 2 tasks with 1 person, there's value there too. You're not hiring a second person to do that.
So the DPW current collective bargaining agreement doesn't address this at all?
No.
Okay. All right, so I guess I raised something that's probably easier this way, even though it's clunky, it's clunkier. Could be clunkier.
Right.
Okay. All right, anybody have any comment as far as the recommendation to go from 4 to 8 once we appoint the new tree warden?
Well, I think it does raise the question that we should maybe take another look at the shade tree policy.
Okay, we can do that. But, so do you want to do a motion to say it'd be 8 if we keep the shade tree policy, and it'd be 7 if we rescind it?
Sure.
I'm just trying to get this in the budget, so
Yeah.
we can keep this rolling, because it's got to then go to personnel board, and they are rather short on members right now, so they have trouble getting a quorum, so we've got to try to give them as much time as we can to get it approved, right, Vanessa?
It's on their agenda for next week.
Okay, good. So I'd like to get this off our list tonight, if we
Yep.
can, if there's an agreement. After what we saw with capital, it's pretty short money. So that we're done with this, and then next meeting, we'll actually approve and appoint the tree warden.
So, Madam Chair, all I will say is that we've not increased this number in quite a while.
I agree.
I think you see the value that we've gotten from Chris as the board's designee in doing this. $1,000 is, I understand what Bill is asking, but I really think that it should be $8,000 regardless. And making determination on the shade tree policy, you know, is a separate matter, but which will take some of that off his plate. But I do think the amount is deserved regardless of what you do with the policy.
Thank you.
I agree with that, and I'm not going to ask Bill what $8,000 works out to for an hourly rate.
Right. Not much.
It's going to be ugly, right?
All right.
I'm okay with that.
All right, so I'll make a motion to change the tree warden stipend as of 7/1/25 to $8,000 from its current $4,000.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? All right,
Thank you.
okay. All right. You're still on, Bill.
Yes. So before you, you have a memo. As you know, we've lost 3 senior people in our DPW due to retirement, which is a good thing, both for them and to some extent for the budget and us. So with those high-level grades and steps, it opens the opportunity. We're currently advertising for the 3 positions, well, 2 positions. The 3rd position, the transfer station assistant, their title was actually Equipment Operator 2, and what I would like to do is to take that and create a new position called Assistant Transfer Station Operator. The transfer station operator, you can't have the same level person in both positions. It's better to have a hierarchy, if you will. And so that's part of the logic as to why we want to decrease that down to a step 2 from a grade 2 from a grade 4. That combined with the other 2 positions going from step 9s down to steps 1 through 4, somewhere in that range. I included a chart in your packet. Looking at those 3 positions, I'm proposing that we add another position of truck driver, and looking at it from a salary perspective only, not a benefits perspective. If we hire all 4 positions as a step 1, we're actually saving $316 a year. If we hire all 4 as a step 4, it'll cost us an additional $21,000 a year. So my recommendation is we definitely need assistance in the department. We're short. This will help support the rest of the department and at minimal expense. It's a good opportunity with the vacancies that have been created. So
What's the benefits cost for these options, roughly?
that's a good question, and I'd have to kick it over to Mark on that.
I'd have to think back to what we just did at town meeting, but I think it's probably about $30,000.
Per person,
Yeah, so,
But 3 of these positions are existing.
already there.
So those are already baked into the budget,
an
but
extra 30
there
on
is going to
top
be
of
a new position, which is going to require a new set of benefits. And as you know, Brian Ballantyne tells you every year, we run that pretty thin in terms of extra plans.
So worst case is 50K, 20 plus 30 ballpark.
That's right.
and you just don't know what step they're going to come in at, that's why you're saying.
That's right.
Okay.
The authority that the department head has is from step 1 to step 4. So, of course, I'm going to try and get at the low end, but if someone warrants coming in at a step 4 and they're a good person, that's what we're going to do.
What have you done for your fiscal year 26 budget as far as this goes?
I've maintained the existing positions
So you'll need to
as
adjust
step
that.
9.
If we approve you doing this, you'd have to
Yep.
adjust the budget
Yep.
quickly.
That's correct.
Yeah, I support this.
Anybody have any issue with this?
Go ahead, Al.
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
Oh, I just have one question. Where on the first page of the interoffice memorandum, 3, reclassification of Bridget's position, the second item, 2, transfer station assistant grade 2, but in the job description, it's assistant transfer station operator. It's just 2 slightly different terms for the same job. They're the same job, right?
It's the same job. My understanding is there were some concessions made when the transfer was made from the cemetery department to that transfer station position.
So the actual title would be assistant transfer station operator?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
The 2 questions I've got is, how successful are you in your recruiting? Are you getting applicants? You know?
We are getting dribs and drabs of applicants. We do have one candidate that is very excited and keeps inquiring about the status, but I haven't landed the plane on the positions. So once I do, we're going to schedule interviews probably next week.
Okay. Okay. Then the second item is, it looks like in this financial policy review, we're going to greatly expand the pool of people that are available for tax work-offs. In particular, the recommendation is to increase the income threshold and also the rates. And so I'm going to simply encourage you to think about how you might use those people in some form of operations. I don't expect you're going to get any tax write-off folks that are heavy equipment operators, but you never know. Yeah.
I'm a big advocate of that program, and I do have positions that I could use people
Okay.
on.
When I apply for mine, I would love to drive. I have snow plowing experience.
There you go, Bill.
Yeah.
That makes me very nervous.
It's the mailbox. Which side did you get the tax write-off guy?
I'm going to give you your mailbox.
Well, we know what the mailbox policy is, so you'll get $50.
Yeah, 50.
Okay, Al, is that it?
35.
Okay. Everybody sounds like they're okay with this? Okay, so I'll make a motion to approve the changes that Bill has requested to the various positions in the DPW outlined in his memo.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you.
All right, Bill, you're still on.
All right, lastly, we have received a letter, and I'm not sure if everyone's received a copy, but Mass DOT, as mentioned earlier with Jason, we did submit to have Corderville Road, the southerly portion from Route 9 down to Southville Road, as part of the TIP project. We thought it was a good candidate project, given the fact that between Route 9 and the train station, the state would look favorable upon it. And that's what it appears. They've come in with their estimate for the total federal participating construction costs of $18.5 million to do that project. So this means, much like the Main Street project, this would get on the tip, and then the state would basically pay for it and manage it. We'd have some input and oversight, but it'd be their project. We, of course, would be responsible for the design portion. The design gets done by our engineer, gets submitted to the state for review, and then once it's approved, they take it over. So
We design, we pay for the design, and then they take it from there.
correct. So it's a minor cost for the town to bear relative to the benefit that we receive for the construction.
What is that minor cost roughly?
I don't have VHB's proposal yet, but I've asked them for it.
It's going to be millions of dollars? Or?
No. Well, usually, roughly, it's 10% of the construction cost generally, okay? Given that we've already got the existing conditions survey and a lot of the legwork that's been done already,
We had a pretty good
I would
plan.
I would expect we're going to be below that. But I am waiting for that proposal. There's a few things we need to do before we can return this letter to the state, but I fully support it. It doesn't mean we're on the tip. We have a project number, which is a good thing. Once we get our eggs and ducks in a row, we submit to the state, and then they review it again and tell us whether or not it gets on their
So you need to have a
program.
town meeting approve the funding for the design?
We could probably tap into Chapter 90 for that, or that could come out of our road maintenance funds. I don't want to just use road maintenance funds for engineering. You know, I'd rather put it into the roads.
But this sounds like really good news.
It is, yeah.
What does this do to our Framingham Road, Marlborough Road tip project?
That's still on the tip. They're independent of one another.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still moving forward with that as
So
well.
there's no downside for that one from being accepted for this?
That's correct.
Good,
They all stand on their own merits, Sam.
good.
So hence this not being in the capital plan that we were discussing, we've got a plan to have the state cover it.
Yes, when we know more with the design and whatnot, I'll submit it and loop in the capital plan. You know, I get mixed signals depending on the type of project, whether or not they want to know about it. So I usually err on the side of caution and give them more than they want.
I would.
Yeah.
I would. Why did we have to contribute so much to the downtown project? Why was such a big piece of that ours, not just engineering? You know, we paid for it from call it Morrow's on down to Newton Street. Why did?
Because that's not part of the TIP project. The TIP project terminated pretty much at Park Ave,
Right, and
Park
so we
Street.
wanted to do more, so we said, we'll pay for that piece.
Correct.
Okay, this is different, they're gonna pay for the whole thing. And all we
Correct.
do is do the engineering, and we've got control of the design,
Correct.
okay, local control of design. So we'd have a chance for.
Well, they're only going to approve a design that they approve, so,
I understand, but we at least have the opportunity for input from residents as far as
that's
design
correct.
goes.
And there's milestones that the state even has for input from residents, so.
And like the Main Street project, we would need to get all the easements approved by town meeting.
That's correct. That falls on
Permanent,
us. So we will,
temporary
if
construction.
there are takings, we will bear that cost.
So this is $18 million of road money we don't have to come up with. I don't know why we wouldn't say, let's keep going. until-
And we have 2 years
2 years,
in order to get all the approvals.
That's
required
right.
for this to move forward.
So Al can subtract this from his big number.
So it's
So now it's.
0.25 billion minus.
$232 million.
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness.
That's progress.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so what do you want, I mean, this is just an update, you don't need a.
No, this, in fact, it was mailed to you, Kathy, I think.
Yeah, I sent it to everybody else. I've-
Yeah, and there's no action required. We're moving forward with it. And your support, this is just to let you know and get your support and keep you in the loop.
Thank you.
Okay?
All right.
Thank you.
So I think
Thank you.
you're done for the night, Bill.
Have a good night.
All right. Drive
Yeah.
carefully.
The current project does not deal with that. They've looked at one main culvert at Richards Road where that stream crossing is. If there's something that needs to get done with that, we would probably have to take that on ourselves beforehand. Okay?
It's a little bit of a
We still
complicated one,
ask.
right?
Yeah.
Still ask.
But we've got time. That's the good news, okay?
Good.
Thank you.
Sincerely, Bill, thank you for everything. Okay, we are going to table item E at the request of Andrew. He's still working on the state of the town. The next one is, Sam's going to handle discussion. So Sam's going to talk about the possible reorg of Youth and Family Services and the Senior Center.
Okay. Thanks. I asked that this be included in the agenda, but not for any detailed discussion at this point, and particularly not for any vote or on any decision here, but to start the process for consideration of the issue. I've been thinking about this for some time, and I believe that for several reasons, it's now time to consider this more directly. The basic concept is I've seen many areas, and part of my day job is healthcare, social services kind of things, that the traditional way of dealing with a lot of these things is isolated issues and silos kind of things. And there is huge value and a track record for the value of addressing these as integrated issues. And for example, youth and family, a child with problems typically involves a parent, siblings, others, and seniors with problems can often be a broader family issue there as well. So I think there's great opportunity to deal with these kinds of things in a more integrated way. And it not only produces better solutions, it tends to be more cost-effective as well. And so it seems to me that thinking of senior services, youth and family, and veteran services as a combined set of services makes a lot of sense. And it also is consistent with my long-held belief that we need to find better ways to provide more services to youth and family needs as well as seniors. And we've all talked about the fact that senior population is growing, and again, given the economy and other social pressures, the only direction that the need for services is going in is up. So it seems also to me that from a timing standpoint, there are some pending retirements in the senior center staff. There's new staff at Youth and Family Services. So I think this is a great time to rethink and consider how we might restructure this as the town delivers what I would call more broadly defined as human services, that to me is a better description of what we're trying to do here. And so I believe that there could be an effective way to combine, again, senior services, youth and family, veteran services into a single organization that can provide these more integrated services and potentially improve both the quality and quantity of services available all with a very small budget impact, which is, I think, again, great opportunity if we can do it. So my proposal is that we seriously consider such a consolidation for FY26, and I'd offer to work with the senior services staff, the Council on Aging, Youth and Family staff, the Youth Commission, and Veterans Agent, and members of these populations to come up with a specific plan to move forward on this. And I'd emphasize again that this is the very first step. I mean, this has not been developed in any detail and socialized across all these groups at this point. But I wanted to get it on the agenda so we can start talking about it in a very focused way. And the next step, again, would be to go out and talk with a broad swath of people, talk about it, and then come back to this board with a discussion and a proposal. And as a starting point, I do have some ideas about this, how it might work, that I'd use for the next set of discussions. And I guess I would, as we've done in other places, maybe think about having one other member of this board to work with me on this to allow us to move forward as a next step. So again, no decisions, no votes in the near term here certainly, but again, looking for ideas and input from various people. And my sense is that from a timing standpoint, if we're going to do something like this, there are a lot of things that make this an attractive time to consider it and move on it if we so decide. So that's sort of where I am on this, and looking for I guess, a sense of, is this worth continuing? And if so, is there anybody who's willing to actually work with me on it to take it to the next step?
I'd be willing to do that too.
So what do you think? You think this is worthwhile looking at?
My sense of it is, I know that the Shine counselor at the senior center is very helpful in wading through the morasses about insurance and Social Security. And I know that Youth and Families often have people that need assistance, again, filling out paperwork or looking for counseling. And I think that is one place where I do see overlap, if it were possible to do some of it.
Medicaid,
Yes,
Youth and Family
Medicaid,
particularly, which
yep,
is, and
exactly.
some seniors are on
So
Medicaid as well.
that's an important service, and they're both providing it separately.
Sarah is also starting to spend time at the senior center. She's got regular hours over there now.
Office hours there, yeah.
They're going to move, we think, to Flag in July 1st, so they're going to be physically close. That's another thing. You've got 2 pending retirements, as Sam said. 2 of the 3 employees have made known that they will retire in the near future. So that I think is conducive to doing this now. So I'm all for looking at this. I don't see what the downside is. I think other towns have done this. Some towns now have HHS departments like the federal government does, and they've picked up their health too. Northborough, I believe, combined health and youth and family services recently. So others are doing this too. We're not breaking new ground here for sure.
Well, there's a good track record. It works.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I think
there's
it
a lot of
makes
data that says
total
it does.
sense. I hope we get more out of it than we do now. So I think we definitely, I'm supporting looking at this.
I would be glad to assist you with that,
Okay.
because I've
Okay.
been on the youth and.
Yep, sure.
family
Yes,
board.
you do. Everybody okay with Marguerite and Sam leading the charge here and coming back?
Yes,
All right, so I don't think there's anything
I
to
will-
vote on.
We'll move forward and come back at some point quickly as we can.
I guess
with
I'll just say
specifics.
I have some reluctance or skepticism about the idea, just because I think the senior center kind of works, one philosophy is if it ain't broke, don't
Yep.
fix it, And it's a place where it's not, I don't think it sees itself as a social service agency, it's more just a community gathering place. So that's something I think that, you should think about.
Understand, yeah, and youth and family works pretty well too nowadays, as a matter of fact. And again, there is a lot of what I think of as social service support
Mhm.
out of the senior center, in addition to the,
Meals on Wheels.
yeah, things that are more visible there. And clearly, you don't want to lose any of that capacity, but can we, build on that and leverage it more? I think maybe, and that's what I'm interested in looking at.
To have the conversation.
Okay,
So,
I mean, I'm all ears, so.
okay.
I mean, that's a good point, Andrew, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yep. Okay,
Okay, everybody agree? All right, next is the referral of the 3 zoning bylaws that are being proposed for 1, 2, 3. Well, but we still, all right, so I guess we can't refer unless we've got a draft. Is that what you're saying? Okay, all right, so there may be a third. So tonight, all the planning board has asked us to do is basically give them the ability to open their public hearings on the first two that they have proposed. The first one is the ADU bylaw that would basically change our bylaw to conform with the recent changes in state law, right?
Right.
So that one makes sense. And then the second one is one that I think Marguerite and Chris Lund and Mimi have been working on to try to make parking more effective as far as parking lots that are next to each other, right?
Shared parking.
It's shared parking,
Yep.
yeah, which is only in one place in town right now, and it seems to be working out fine, so expand that.
And Kathy, I'd comment that planning board last night actually talked about the ADU bylaw and got some public input on that, and I think there's a fair amount of work to do on that one, so it's good to send it to them as quickly as we can.
Yeah, so we send them, and then they
Yep.
come back and
Yep.
decide whether it's ready for prime time, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
So all we're doing is sending it to them and saying,
understood, yeah. I think there's substantial debate that's required on the ADU. You know, this bylaw takes the maximal approach as opposed to a more minimalist approach, but we should send it forward. On number 3, I met with the cast of characters, and the planning board and the building department and the economic development department today, and actually made some good progress on greatly expanding allowed use, or the uses without requiring a special permit. So I think there's a good chance that we will actually have something there as well. It may have to require a separate public hearing, but it's going to be a couple weeks to do. But there was substantial discussion. It might even include expanding the maximum square footage.
right, so that's a
Okay.
positive step too. These are all, number 2 and number 3 are very positive steps to try to make things, again, more easier to get done here. Okay, so the motion is to refer the zoning amendment for the ADU bylaw, 174-9, and the zoning amendment for shared parking bylaw language in 174-9 and 174-21 to the planning board so they can open their public hearings.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. So you'll let Karina know that we did what they asked us to do. Okay, the next one is very exciting. So as everyone probably knows, the changes that were made at the September 30th special town meeting have now been approved by the Attorney General. The Attorney General they had some language to this one, but we've checked with Town Council. We are free to approve tonight as far as appointing members to the revamped Affordable House Trust. Shopsy is now gone, right? So we've got one entity here. We have had, so we've got 5 trustees with the new structure. 1 is going to come from the Select Board, 4 are going to come from elsewhere. We've had 3 applications so far for those 4 positions. I do believe we're going to have a 4th that we can consider on the 21st, who is also a person that's got a pretty good background in the stuff and is pretty excited about being able to do that. So tonight, we've got 3. So the plan tonight is to talk about the 3 and also appoint the Select Board rep to the Affordable House Trust so they can get to business, right? So you have a quorum at that point. You got 4 out of 5.
Yep.
Okay, so let's start with the 3 non-select board members. So we've got Jesse from the Planning Board, Jesse Stein. We've got Doug Mance, who currently sits on the ZBA and was Shopsy. Jesse was Shopsy too. All 3 of these were Shopsy, right?
Correct.
Okay, so we got 3 former Shopsy members, and then Jesse, as we know, is on Planning Board. Doug Mance is on ZBA, and Paul Desmond is on the Regional School Committee Board.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, all well-known
Yep.
and got strong track records in town, and
Yep.
I certainly support all of them.
Anyone have an issue with any of these 3?
I don't. The one thing I wanted to mention is that I pulled up the bylaw that we passed, so it says that these appointments are for 2-year terms. It doesn't say in the bylaw that they're staggered terms, but it makes sense.
We should stagger.
So I think it makes sense that just I mean, I can't think of any good way to select who gets a one-year term and who gets a two-year term.
So we do
But it
2,
does
1,
make
and 2,
sense
2?
to just appoint two folks for a one-year term. And
Yeah.
so that you build in some staggering.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so Andrew, you want to make the motion based on your staggering?
Put me in a, so have we discussed who the select board representative?
We're going to do
Is-
that last.
Okay.
So you can let the select board be one of the 2-year, maybe? Well,
Or 1 year.
Well,
okay, yeah, I do the select board 1 year.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
and then have, so let's just do arbitrarily, make Jesse be the 1 year, and then
okay.
let
So
Doug and,
I move that the board appoint Jesse Stein as a trustee of the Affordable Housing Trust for a term expiring June 30th, 2025.
okay, a second on that one?
It's less than a year.
No, well,
Well, but then. so
that
then
gets
you-
them on the schedule.
If we don't do it that
You
way.
got to do it based
we're
on
gonna-
June,
It's
right?
going to
Okay.
get
That's the way
forgotten.
we should do it, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I agree, we should do it 6:30, or we're going to
Oh,
get
I'll
it.
second.
You agree?
There's the 2 year. I'll second that one for Jesse.
Okay. All in favor, Jesse, for a term ending 6/30/25? Okay,
Yep.
so that one's done. Okay, go
And
ahead.
then I move that the board appoint Doug Mance and Paul Desmond as trustees for the Affordable Housing Trust for terms expiring June 30th, 2026.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, so now we've got 3. Now, let's talk about the select board rep. Do we have any volunteers? Okay. Do we have any other volunteers besides Al?
I was going to volunteer Al, actually.
Okay. All right, so Al, you're willing to serve as a select board rep to the,
Yeah, I do believe it would be better if someone else chaired.
well, you guys can deal with that when you have your first meeting,
Yeah,
right?
but I actually agree with that, Al, because
I do too, I do too.
we are sort of oversight here and shouldn't be driving that process from a chair's position, I think, so.
We agree, it sounds like.
And I think I should have a one-year term.
Yeah, so, yeah, you're going to,
So the idea is we appoint you to a rump term. So,
People have always some things that are
He's been called worse.
okay.
all right, so Andrew, you'll make the motion for Al.
I move that the board appoint Al Hamilton as the select board representative to the Affordable Housing Trust for a term expiring June 30th, 2025.
Second.
All in favor? All right. Much in favor. Congratulations, Al, and thank you for doing this.
It's a
Okay.
great opportunity. Very exciting.
All right, and I do think we'll have a 4th applicant for the at-large position on the 21st. Okay, Vanessa, anybody in the audience for public comment?
No hands up.
All right, so executive session is next. Okay. So we're going to enter into executive session per MGL Chapter 38, Section 21, and we're not going to return to open session to discuss the following. We've got 2 things to discuss. Discuss strategy with respect to litigation, which is exemption 3, and police chief contract negotiations, which is exemption 2, as the chair has determined that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the town's position. So can I have a motion to go into executive session?
Second.
Okay, and you're going to tell me it's a roll call vote, although I don't agree. Al?
Aye.
Marguerite? Aye. Sam?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
And Cook is aye.